So welcome guys, please join my Patreon link in description. What if Harry and Hermione build secret harem with Voldemort? Harry is killed at 17 during a fight with Voldemort. He's sent to his death's office, explained later, and finds out that this isn't the first time that this has happened. Harry's death, who can have a human name, is mad at his arrival. Apparently, people dying before their time is a black mark on the various deaths records, and Harry is getting perilously close to getting this particular one fired. When Harry asks what was supposed to have happened, Death goes off on a rant saying how he was supposed to have killed Voldemort, found his soulmate, some Granger girl, and lived to be a centennial age. But since Harry keeps getting into life-threatening situations for one reason or another, he keeps dying before that happens. Harry is surprised about the soulmate part. Death gives Harry a paper to sign that allows him to retain his memories the previous times. He wasn't given this option for some reason. Harry is deposited to a previous time of the writer's choosing. Eventually, Harry gets it right. He kills Voldemort, gets the girl, and lives to a ripe old age of whatever. And Death doesn't get fired. Requirements. Harry had to have died at least 3 times before this one. The memory-keeping contract must be included. Death must refer to Hermione as some Granger girl when Harry's soulmate turns up in his rant. Obviously, must be H-hour. Have fun. Optional. Dumbledore's manipulations can be a factor in Harry's premature demises. Harry Potter found himself in front of a man seated at a desk. He was very confused. He remembered that he had been fighting Voldemort in the Great Hall. He had fired an Expelliarm to Voldemort's Avada Kedavra, and instead of bouncing back like he thought it would, the spell had hit him. Now he was in some nameless office with a man who didn't look too happy sitting in front of him. Harry James Potter. We meet again. Harry looked at man and wondered what he meant. Why are you in my office? Again. I don't understand, sir. Harry didn't know if this man was a muggle or not, so he tried to censor what he said. I was in a firefight with a terrorist, and he hit me with his weapon, and the next thing I knew I was here. Where is here, anyway? The Ma-en looked at him like he was a squashed flobberworm, disgusting and annoying all at once. Oh, you mean that fight in the Great Hall with Voldemort? When he hit you with the killing curse? Harry looked relieved that he wouldn't have to hide his magic. Oh, yes, I know all about the magical world. I know all about your constant struggles against evil. I know all about your idiotic heroics that lead you to getting killed. I know all about it. Why can't you just do what you're supposed to do and let me do my job right? Why? Harry was flummoxed. The man behind the desk's face started looking like Vernon Dursley's after witnessing something from the magical world. I don't know why I'm yelling at you. You don't remember all the other times. But I do. And let me tell you, I've had it up to here. The man yelled, putting his hand flat in front of his neck. What gave you the bright idea to use a disarming curse against a killing curse? You know, it's quite simple. You're supposed to kill the bad guy. Marry your soulmate, some Granger girl, and live to nice ripe age of 179. But, no. Once again, you go and do something stupid and end up in my office. Again, Harry could now say he was more confused than ever. There was one part of the man's rant which did push through the rest. I don't understand. What about Ginny? Besides, Hermione's with Ron. I couldn't interfere. The man just looked at him again. You might be the most powerful wizard since Merlin, but you, young sir, are a complete idiot. Harry didn't know about the powerful part, but hadn't he figured out the Horcruxes? Well, to be sure. There was some luck involved. And Hermione, well, anyway. I will explain. Again, I am Larry, your Grim Reaper. I am in charge of making sure you complete the destiny that has been given to you and then move on to your proper reward. And let me tell you, since I know you won't remember the earlier times, I'll remind you, this isn't the first time you've been in my office. First it was the time you splinched yourself when you apparated onto the school roof. Then you got your head bashed in a wizard's chess match. That one wasn't pretty. I still can't believe you did. Show up after the basilisk bit you in second year, a bit of luck there. Then there was the drowning in your 4th year. Gillyweed only lasts an hour and waiting for all the other champions with a broken watch. Once again, stupid. The Dementors before year 5th weren't completely your fault, but still. Then there was the trip through the veil in 5th year running after Sirius Black. And last, but not least, the poisoned mead after your friend, one Ronald Weasley, was dosed with love potions and that idiot potions teacher passed around the libations. And that's another thing. I know the dimwit was your first friend and all. But why in the hell would you sit back and wait for him to let him be an idiot for 3 years, so he could have the girl? Especially since she was the wrong girl for him. Oh, I only love her like a sister. Come on, man, where's the Gryffindor courage? Oh, and the red-headed girl. Don't even let me start on that fangirl. Don't you think that her obsession with the boy who lived was a tad overboard? Not her fault really, silly interfering overbearing mothers, gotta hate him, a dose of a love potion and you humans all get silly. Harry spluttered, what? What do you mean love potion? When did this happen? Larry looked at Harry. I'm sorry, but Molly Pruitt Weasley isn't one to sit back and let things happen, if she has any say in the matter. After all, you weren't attached and her little girl was obsessed with you. What was going to stop her? Harry just shook his head. He remembered his feelings that he had suppressed when Ron had seemed interested in Hermione. And Hermione didn't exactly seem disinterested either in 6th year. Of course, come to think of it, Hermione had seemed more depressed than she should have been. Look, since this is black mark number 7 for one client, I have to go to a departmental review. I'm this close to getting fired and it is your fault. Larry yelled, holding his fingers about a quarter inch apart. As the client witness, you will stay in the hallway and wait until you are called. We have 10 minutes to get to my hearing. Follow me. At that, Larry, his grim reaper apparently, walked out of the office. In a huff and down the hall to a door with a chair next to it. The door read, Afterlife Inc. Reaper Department of Great Britain. Director's Office. He was sat in the chair and Larry passed in the door. As Harry sat in the hallway, he reviewed his life and his interactions with Ron, Ginny, Mrs. Weasley, Dumbledore and especially Hermione. And as he sat there, he realized he might have been making a lot of mistakes. It was about 30 minutes later when a woman opened the door and called him into the office. The office had a large desk with several chairs facing it. In one of the chairs was Lair. Why looking less annoyed than earlier but still somewhat distracted. The woman who had called him in sat behind the desk and looked at him. Harry Potter, I am Laura and I am the director for the Grim Reapers of Great Britain. We have just had a review of your Reaper Larry. It seems that you are a difficult client. The woman, a somewhat attractive woman who looked to be in her 30s, looked at him with an admonishing glance. Not since Winston Churchill getting himself blown up in different bombings 50 years ago have we had a client with as many unauthorized deaths or you have had. What do you have to say for yourself? Well, I've been doing my best, Harry replied petulantly. It's not like I haven't had a Dark Lord after me for the last 16 years. Really, Mr. Potter, there is no reason to get snarky. I have been reviewing your files. Now, your Reaper Larry has primary responsibility to get you through to your destiny, but do you really have to make it so hard for him? You see. Old have avoided all the deaths and near misses if you had just used your brains a bit more often. Besides the recorded deaths, there was the incident with a house elf and a car, the incident with Marge Dursley could have been avoided altogether. The World Cup gave you a chance to catch one Barty Crouch Jr. early, the firefight through the skies of London before your camping trip from hell. But, I didn't have much of a choice. I have to live with the Dursleys and underage magic. Oh, don't even get me started. Why have you been letting people run your life? You could have been living in one of your own houses. It's not like your family doesn't have enough of them. Those useless blood wards be damned. Anyway, whatever. In reviewing your file, we have decided for an unusual, not unheard of, course of action. We will be sending you back to an earlier part of your life. Although this in and of itself isn't unusual, we will also be sending you back with your memory intact. Let's try to avoid another unauthorized death, shall we? Harry was surprised. What about paradoxes? Hermione explained in 3rd year. This is not a time turner. You will be placed back to an early our time where changes might bring about a more desired result. You will be taken by Larry to the Destiny Repair Department. And heed them well, another unauthorized death and Larry will be fired, you will be dead and the board of directors will be very unhappy with both me and you. Good day. Larry grabbed his arm and dragged him out of the office before Laura could be more annoyed than she already was. She hadn't seemed this annoyed since William Wallace made a nuisance of himself in the department. That had been a trying century. Larry started talking to Harry. Look, Destiny Repair will fix you up in a jiffy. I have a friend over there named Bob. He's good. A right scheming bastard at times, but you have to be to work in that department. He'll get you sorted. And, do me a favor, will you? Try and get it right. 'Cause if I get fired, it's bargekeeper on the river Styx for me, and that is a horrible job. 3 hours after meeting Bob, he knew that no one that had been sorted into Slytherin had been a more devious bastard. He made Lucius Malfoy look downright artless in the area of cunning. At the end, Larry, who had been with him in the interview the whole time, said, "One more step. In order to preserve the timeline and prevent abuse of this department, you have to sign a contract to keep this to yourself. You can tell your soulmate, but that's about it. Sign here at the bottom, and off you go." Harry took the pen. Why did they still use quills in the wizarding world, he wondered, and signed his name to the bottom. "Okay, let's get you off to back departure. Remember, try to avoid getting killed." As Larry took him off to another office and pushed him inside, he heard, "See you soon," and wondered what Larry meant as the room blurred and he found himself in a familiar and unpleasant environment. Harry looked around and found himself in between two hedges. As he looked out, there was a light ahead and he saw the Tri-Wizard's Cup. Cedric was running toward it. Harry saw something immense over the hedge to his left, moving quickly along a path that intersected his own. It was the damned Acromatula, and Cedric was about to run into it, and Cedric, his eyes on the cup, had not seen it. "Cedric!" Harry yelled out. "On your left." Cedric looked around just in time to hurl himself past the Acromatula and he tripped. Harry, just like the first time, saw Cedric's wand fly out of his hand as it stepped into the path and toward Cedric. "Stupefy!" Harry yelled. The spell hit the spider's gigantic body. Just as he remembered from the last time, the spider jerked, scuttled around, and ran at Harry instead. However, instead of what happened last time, Harry did something different. Reducto. The spell lashed out and hit the spider at the top of one of its legs. Harry overpowered it so that it knocked one of the legs off the spider. The spider stopped and ran back the other way, away from its tormentor. "Harry, you all right?" Cedric asked. "Yeah, I'm just fine. That was a nasty bugger. Remind me to tell you how Ron and I faced down a nest of those in the Forbidden Forest sometime." Cedric looked at Harry amazed. Although a lot of weird things seemed to happen around Harry Potter, not all the details were available. It was no wonder Harry had made it so far in the tournament. "Take it, then," Harry said to Cedric. "Go on, take it. You're there." Harry had a plan in mind. It would be tight, but if he was careful he could manage to save Cedric's life and still let him have at least half the glory. If he could remember the conversation well enough, he could prepare. Cedric stood there, looking at Harry. He turned to stare at the cup. Harry saw the longing expression once again on his face in its golden light. Cedric looked around at Harry again, who as now holding onto the hedge to suggest he was using it to support himself. Cedric took a deep breath. "No, you take it. That's not how it's supposed to work," Harry said. "The one to reach the cup first wins and you were closer." Cedric took a few paces nearer to the spider leg, away from the cup, shaking his head. "No," he said. "Take it, and then we can get out of here." Cedric watched Harry steadying himself, holding tight to the hedge. "You told me about the dragons," Cedric said. "I would have gone down in the first task if you hadn't told me what was coming." Harry said. "You helped me with the egg, we're square." "I had help on the egg in the first place," said Cedric. "We're still square," said Harry. "You should have got more points on the second task," said Cedric mulishly. "You stayed behind to get all the hostages." "I should have done that. I was the only one who was thick enough to take that song seriously," said Harry, acting bitter. "Just take the cup." "No," said Cedric. He stepped over the spider's leg to join Harry, who stared at him. Cedric was serious. "Go on," Cedric said. He looked as though this was costing him every ounce of resolution he had, but his face was set, his arms were folded. He seemed decided. Harry looked from Cedric to the cup. For a moment he thought of Hermione and all the help she had given him to get him to this place. Sharing the victor. Why would be what Hermione would want him to do? He found himself staring at Cedric's shadowy, stubborn face. Both of us, Harry said. What? We'll take it at the same time. It's still a Hogwarts victory. We'll tie for it. Cedric stared at Harry. He unfolded his arms. You sure? Yeah, said Harry. Yeah, we've helped each other out, haven't we? We both got here. Let's just take it together. For a moment, Cedric looked as though he couldn't believe his ears, then his face split in a grin. You're on, he said. Come here. With Cedric in front of him, he didn't see Harry take out his wand and point it at his back. Stupefy. Cedric crumpled to the ground 2 feet from the cup. Just because he wanted Cedric to share in the glory didn't mean he wanted him to get in the way when they met up with Wormtail and Voldemort. He had to act fast. He moved quickly over to the spider leg that had been left by the Acromatula. He cut a section off of his robe and transfigured it to a watertight pouch. He took a large leaf from one of the plants and picked the leg up and dumped some of the blood into the pouch. Bob's suggestions of spells to use were coming in handy. It was disgusting, but if it worked, Voldemort wouldn't be quite up to snuff when he was done and wouldn't be calling together his various Death Eaters. He couldn't stop the resurrection, fate had a hand in that. But GHT make it less than what Voldemort was looking for. He sealed the pouch with a spell and using a sticking charm placed it on his arm where Wormtail would be using his knife to get some blood. He ran back over to where Cedric lay near the cup. He reached down and took Cedric's hand and pulled it up so that it almost touched the cup. At the same time, he placed his own hand near the other handle. Here goes nothing, Harry said as he touched his own and Cedric's hand to the cup and felt the portkey whisk them away. Harry and Cedric touched down in the graveyard in Little Hangleton. Harry dragged Cedric over to a gravestone and hid him behind it. He levitated the cup so that it was right next to his body. He didn't want Wormtail to see there was another person there. He took Cedric's wand and put it up his sleeve. The sleeve that didn't have the blood pouch. Now all he needed was a little bit of acting. He remembered the direction from which Wormtail and Voldemort had come last time and moved 20 feet in that direction and fell to the ground as though he fainted, his wand in his hand. Luckily the Horcrux in his head had already been destroyed, so he wasn't overcome with pain by Voldemort's proximity anymore. He could still feel his excitement though. Any second now. And here we have the final part to our little ritual already under control. Bring him quickly and bind him to the headstone. Remember, he must be awake when his blood is taken forcibly. Harry felt himself moved by magic through the air and placed against the headstone. He felt rope wrap around him holding his body against the stone. He felt a cloth stuck into his mouth to keep him from crying out. And then, enervate. Harry acted as though he was coming around from having fainted. Wormtail was too distribution, acted to notice that he had been faking it. Voldemort was too concerned with getting the ritual done to have Wormtail actually check. Harry could hear Nagini at his feet, slithering through the grass, circling the headstone where he was tied. Wormtail's fast, wheezy breathing was growing louder again. There would be the cauldron, he thought. Wormtail came into sight pushing the cauldron he would use in the ritual to resurrect his master. Voldemort was stirring more persistently, as though he was trying to free himself. Wormtail busied himself at the bottom of the cauldron with a wand. Suddenly there were crackling flames beneath it. The large snake slithered away into the darkness. Steam was thickening, blurring the outline of Wormtail tending the fire. The movements beneath the robes became more agitated. And Harry heard the high, cold voice again. Hurry! The whole surface of the water was alight with sparks, just as it had been last time. It is ready, master. Now, said the cold voice. Wormtail pulled open the robes on the ground, revealing Voldemort's ugly little baby form. It was hairless and scaly looking, a dark, raw, reddish-black. Its arms and legs were thin and feeble. And its face, no child alive ever had a face like that, flat and snake-like, with gleaming red eyes. Voldemort raised his thin arms, put them around Wormtail's neck, and Wormtail lifted him. Wormtail lowered the creature into the cauldron. There was a hiss, and the small form vanished below the surface. Harry heard its frail body hit the bottom with a soft thud. Wormtail was speaking. His voice shook. He seemed frightened beyond his wits. He raised his wand, closed his eyes, and spoke to the night. Bone of the father, unknowingly given, you will renew your son. The surface of the grave at Harry's feet cracked. Harry watched as a fine trickle of dust rose into the air at Wormtail's command and fell softly into the cauldron. The diamond surface of the water broke and hissed, its NT sparks in all directions and turned a vivid, poisonous-looking blue. Wormtail was whimpering. He pulled the long, thin, shining silver dagger from inside his cloak. His voice broke into petrified sobs. Flesh, of the servant, willingly given, you will revive your master. He stretched his right hand out in front of him, the hand with the missing finger. He gripped the dagger very tight in his left hand and swung it upward. Harry closed his eyes. He heard something fall to the ground, heard Wormtail's anguished panting and then the sickening splash, as the hand was dropped into the cauldron. Harry kept his eyes closed. The potion had turned a burning red. The light of it shone through Harry's closed eyelids. Wormtail was gasping and moaning with agony. Once again, Harry felt Wormtail's anguished breath on his face as Wormtail was right in front of him. Be blood of the enemy, forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe. Struggling as though he was fighting, he opened his eyes and saw the shining silver dagger shaking in Wormtail's remaining hand. He didn't feel the penetration as Wormtail had hit the sack of blood at his elbow and he felt the blood seeping down the sleeve of his torn robes. He acted as though he had been stabbed though. Wormtail, still panting with pain, rumbled in his pocket for a glass vial and held it to the cut, so that a dribble of blood fell into it. He staggered back to the cauldron with the blood. He poured it inside. The liquid within turned, instantly, a sick yellow color. Wormtail dropped to his knees beside the cauldron, then slumped sideways and lay on the ground, cradling the bleeding stump of his arm, gasping and sobbing. Harry knew he had about 1 minute before whatever Voldemort came out of the cauldron. He wiggled his other arm and dropped Cedric's wand into his hand. A wordless finite undid the ropes he was tied with. He achieted his own wand and used it to stupefy Wormtail. He had about 30 seconds and each second counted. He saw Nagini slithering back over to him to stop him and one reducto and that threat was gone. He achieted Wormtail's and Voldemort's wands and stuck them in his pocket. He ran over to W. Here he had left the cup and Cedric and called, Accio Wormtail. And Wormtail's body came flying toward him. He grabbed Cedric and looked up. Voldemort was coming out of the cauldron and he didn't look like he was enjoying it. The pain-filled face of Voldemort had looked murderous and his body showed up, covered in fur just like an acromatula's. His face had pincers coming out of his mouth and his arms were deformed. Harry called over, Ta. As Wormtail's body came over to him, he heard Cedric stirring. Harry hissed at him, grab the cup. And with one hand on Wormtail, he grabbed the portkey J. As Cedric's hesitantly touched the other handle. As it whisked them away, he could hear Voldemort's scream of rage and anguish. As Harry, Cedric and Wormtail landed back at the school, Harry said in a low voice, Cedric. You're awake. Don't say anything until you get your father to call Amelia Bones. Trust me. Cedric looked over at Harry confused but nodded his head. He really didn't know what was happening. He could have sworn he had been stupefied from behind, and the next thing he knew he was in a graveyard grabbing the cup. As screams could be heard in the background, Harry saw Dumbledore hurrying over with Amos Diggory and his wife not far behind. Also, he could see Hermione and Ron staring at him like he was a ghost, until Hermione shrieked and started running over. Dumbledore was very concerned. 2 of his students had disappeared from the maze and 20 minutes later had shown back up via a portkey. As Dumbledore arrived, he said, Cup was a portkey. We ended up in some graveyard. Did anyone check the cup before the task? Dumbledore's eyes widened. He had specifically sent Alistair Moody to check the maze for traps and place the cup. His mind was working a mile a minute. Harry then looked over Dumbledore's shoulder and said quietly to him, Why does Professor Moody look like he's about to attack? Dumbledore whirled around quite nimbly for an old man and shot Moody with a stupefy. Everyone around was shocked for a moment. As Amos got to Cedric, Cedric told his father, Call Madam Bones. Amos had no clue what was going on, but if his son thought that he should call Amelia, he was bloody hell going to do it. At the same time Hermione arrived and knocked Harry over again, sobbing into him. As Harry tried to calm Hermione down, he felt cold all of a sudden. He saw Fudge coming over with his Dementor guard. He grabbed his wand, and thinking about the girl wrapped around him, yelled out, Expecto Patronum. His stag Patronus leapt out of his wand and barrel. D down directly toward the approaching Dementor. He wasn't going to allow Fudge to have Crouch Jr. kissed this time if he could help it. He also had Wormtail there and didn't want to take any chances. Fudge looked outraged that his guard had been driven back by the boy who lived. He was the Minister for Magic for Merlin's sake and he had a right to his guard. What's the meaning of this? Harry stood there watching Fudge with one arm around Hermione and the other with his wand pointed straight at Fudge. Dumbledore, seeing that things were getting out of hand, tapped his wand against his throat and said, "Sonorous. All students and staff, report to the Great Hall. An announcement will be made shortly. Professors McGonagall, Sprout, and Snape please remain." After a quick quietus, Dumbledore looked over at Fudge and said, "Cornelius, please wait until we can sort out exactly what occurred." He looked over at Harry and asked, "My dear boy, what happened?" He looked down at Harry's feet and D saw the stupefied form of Peter Pettigrew and his eyes widened. Harry looked at Dumbledore and replied, "Amos Diggory has called Madam Bones. I think we should wait until she arrives so that I only have to repeat this once." Harry looked at Hermione and whispered to her, "Go to the Great Hall. I'll tell you all about it after it's done." Hermione, who had settled down, looked at Harry and said, "No, Harry. I'm not letting you out of my sight until I know you're all right." Harry looked around and saw Ron, Ginny and Mrs. Weasley looking upset and trying to come over with Bill just looking confused. They were being helped back by Professor Flitwick. He waved over to them and yelled out, "I'm all right. I'll see you after all this is sorted out." The Weasleys didn't look happy but one look at Dumbledore's face and they decided to wait in the Great Hall with everyone else. Harry looked down at Hermione and said, "Well, if you are going to stick around, keep an eye on Wormtail and if he so much as twitches, stupefy him again." Hermione looked down at the man on the ground and saw that it was indeed Pettigrew. As Dumbledore was over talking to Fudge, Harry walked over to Professor McGonagall and asked her to bind Moody. McGonagall had seen Albus stupefy him and so didn't object although her face was set in an expression of deep disapproval. Her only reply was, "I hope there is a suffix. Iant explanation for all of this or you will be in detention through the next year." Harry could only smile at his head of house as he said, "And if when we're done, you feel my actions are unjustified, I'll do them." McGonagall shook her head and hurried over to the prone form of Alistair Moody. Soon, Amos Diggory could be seen hurrying over from the door of Hogwarts with Madam Bones behind him accompanied by two Aurors. Harry was delighted to see that it was Tonks and Shacklebolt. Amelia Bones looked around and was shocked to see what was happening. Diggory was over in one area with his son W. Ho was being helped up by his wife and Professor Sprout. Another student with a wand was standing over a man lying on the ground while Madame Pomfrey was cauterizing his wrist. It looked as though his hand had been cut off. And Minerva McGonagall and Severus Snape were standing over the form of Alistair Moody bound in ropes. Fudge was blustering at Dumbledore and Harry Potter was standing in the middle of it all. With his Triwizard uniform in tatters and what looked like blood dripping from his arm. She hurried over to Harry and asked, "Mr. Potter, are you all right? Your arm is bleeding. What is going on here?" Harry Potter looked at his arm and then looked at her and laughed, "Well, this isn't really my blood. If we can get everyone to Professor Dumbledore's office, I can explain just about everything. He has a pensieve which I can use to show you. If you would though, that man over there was my parents' true secret keeper and he's an animagus. Could you ask your Aurors to secure him?" Melia looked over at the man that Pomfrey was just finishing with again and her eyes widened when she saw that it was Peter Pettigrew. But he was dead. Amelia ordered Tonks to shackle Pettigrew with magic suppression cuffs. Amelia hurried over to Dumbledore and Fudge and saw the Dementor coming back over. She called Shacklebolt over and ordered him to herd it away from the group. She was going to be damned if she let Fudge's paranoia interfere with her finding out the truth. As she got over to them, she heard Fudge say, "This was obviously just a plot by Sirius Black to kidnap Harry Potter again." Amelia interrupted him. "Professor Dumbledore, can we move this inside? I know you have a pensieve and I would request that we use it to review exactly what happened here." Albus Dumbledore smiled. Over at Amelia with his eyes twinkling madly, "Ah. Madam Bones. It's so good to see you. An excellent idea if I do say so. Well, Cornelius, would you like to accompany us and get to the heart of the matter?" Cornelius Fudge didn't look happy to have the head of the DMLE there, but couldn't object. Harry moved back over to Hermione and Tonks introduced herself. "Watcher, Harry Potter. I'm Tonks. Pleased to meet you." Harry hid his smirk and asked, "Is that your last name or first name?" Hermione narrowed her eyes. She knew Harry and it seemed he knew something and was amused. Tonks looked sour for a moment and replied, "Last name. I don't use my first name. So it's just Tonks." She smirked, kinda like one of the Muggle rock stars, like Sting. Harry laughed and said, "Well, it's nice to meet you. Can you bring this person to Professor Dumbledore's office? We're going there to sort all of this out." Everyone, except Shacklebolt, who was keeping the Dementor at bay, followed Dumbledore to his office. With Hermione following Harry, wondering what the hell had happened. She was going to get some answers, and soon, or she was going to bite her best friend's head off. As they passed into the door of Hogwarts, Dumbledore asked McGonagall to have Phileas dismiss the students in the hall back their dormitories in 10 minutes, allowing them time to reach his office, and then to join them in his office. He took over levitating Alastor Moody, and asked Severus to obtain some Veritaserum from his stock. As McGonagall moved away, Harry called out to her, "Professor. Possibly you ask Ron to join us. He was a witness to some of what happened and he might be needed." Minerva looked over at Dumbledore and he nodded his head slightly. She agreed and moved off. As they arrived at his office, Albus turned to Hermione. "Ah, my dear, if you could do me a favor. Earlier, I found a delightful stray dog which I have in my office. A perfectly friendly dog, which I was going to place in a good home when I had the time. If you could look after him while we get to the bottom of things." Albus's eyes twinkled merrily. Hermione looked startled. "Of course, sir. If you have a leash I'll keep him out of the way." Hermione suppressed her urge to smile. "If you would give me a moment, I'll take care of leashing Snuffles and you all can join me." Albus passed into his office and about a minute later called them all in. "Let me arrange things." With a flick of his wand, several well-stuffed chairs popped into existence around the room, as well as 2 wooden chairs with Arma ND leg restraints right in front of the desk. The room was almost packed to the gills. Just as the form of Alastor Moody was placed in the chair, he started changing. The magical eye fell out and the W. Wooden leg jumped off his body as Alastor Moody turned into Barty Crouch Jr. Everyone in the room except Harry stared at him in shock. Dumbledore waved his wand and the chair restraints on both chairs closed. Just then Severus Snape arrived in the office with Veritaserum. Right behind, Professor McGonagall arrived with Ron in tow. She didn't notice the beetle that was perched on the back of her bun, which dropped off into a corner of the room, but Harry was on the lookout. He didn't do anything yet. But soon, very soon, Amelia was extremely shocked. She had arrived to find her old friend bound in ropes, and all of a sudden he had turned into a dead Death Eater. What the hell was going on? She asked Dumbledore, "Can I use your flow to call the Ministry? I believe I will need more oars." "I quite agree. But if I might suggest we hold off for a moment to find out where the real Alastor Moody is. Time may be of the essence." Amelia agreed and asked for the Veritaserum. Snape, his face a calm mask, handed it to her. Even as his eyes darted around, Severus Snape was in a peculiar mood. He had felt the dark mark come alive right before the brat had showed up again and hadn't had an opportunity to alert the headmaster. However, instead of the call that he had been expecting, nothing happened afterwards. And now, Barty Crouch Jr. was bound in the headmaster's office. Something very strange was going on. Amelia administered the serum to Crouch Jr. and waited for it to take effect before casting an enervate on him. She began the questioning. "What is your name?" "Bartemius Crouch." "Why are you at Hogwarts?" "To further my master's plan." "Where is the real Alastor Moody?" "Locked in his trunk in the defense teacher's office." Dumbledore nodded over to Madame Pomfrey and she hurried out to take care of Moody. "What was your master's plan?" "To get Harry Potter through the Tri-Wizards tournament so that I could send him to my master." "What did he plan to do?" "Use Potter for a ritual to return." "How long have you been impersonating Alastor Moody?" "Since August 31st. "How did you escape Azkaban?" "My mother traded places with me." "Where have you been since then?" "At my father's house. Under the Imperious Curse." "Did your father help you escape?" "Yes." "Where is your father?" "Dead." "Did you kill him?" Yes. Why? He had overcome my master's imperious curse enough to come to Hogwarts. When I saw Potter and Krum with him, I knew that he had to die to preserve my secret. Where is his body? In the Defense Against the Dark Arts office. I transfigured it too. A walking stick to keep it with me until I could turn it over to my master to make it an inferi. Dumbledore motioned to Amelia to get permission to ask a few questions of his own. Amelia nodded to him. How were you involved with the Tri-Wizard tournament? I placed Potter's name in the cup under a fourth school, making the name of the school on the parchment invisible. I then guided him to overcome the first task. During the second task, I guided Diggory to the secret of the egg, as I knew he would tell Potter as Potter had told him about the dragons of the first task. I gave the Longbottom boy a book on water plants hoping that Potter would ask for help, but he never did. So I talked loudly in front of the house elf that worships Potter to ask McGonagall if he would think to use gillyweed. For the last task, after turning the cup to a portkey when I placed it in the maze, I imperioed Krum to get rid of the competition to get Potter a free shot at the cup. All around the room, most of the spectators were in a state of shock, outrage and a bit of nausea at the callous plan that unfolded. Hermione had buried her head in Harry's shoulder and was quietly sobbing into him as Padfoot buried his head into Harry's leg. Harry used his two hands to comfort his best friend and dogfather as best he could as he looked on. He looked over at Ron, who before the questioning had been looking over at him with a weird look as Harry had his arm around Hermione's shoulder. He saw that now he was just saying to himself his stock phrase of, bloody hell. Take that, you jealous piece of hippogriff dung. All around the room things were happening. Amelia was calling the ministry for more Aurors, while Dumbledore was talking with Fudge and Amos Diggory. Professors Snape and McGonagall were with them. Cedric was just looking wildly at Barty Crouch Jr. while his mother had him in a death grip. Ron was trying to talk to Hermione while Sirius just sat there staring at Pettigrew, waiting for the secrets to spill out. Harry surreptitiously pulled off a section of his robe and transfigured it into a jar. A silent Accio in the beetle form of Rita Skeeter was trapped. Hermione's eyes widened when she saw this, and she was about to say something when Harry put his finger to his lips to indicate that he'd tell her about it later. 4 more Aurors had come through the flow. Amelia was upset with Fudge, Dumbledore, Crouch Jr., and just about everyone else. Harry Potter had been used in some plot to resurrect Voldemort, and Dumbledore had apparently just sat back and waited for developments. One of her oldest friends had been kidnapped and no one even noticed. Crouch had been harboring an escaped convict and Fudge was blind as a bat. She detailed 2 of the Aurors to take Crouch to a holding cell at the ministry. One of the others, Dawlish, she sent to watch over the Dementor to relieve Shaq. Since he was one of Fudge's favorites, let him take care of the demon that Fudge had brought. Auror Jones she sent, along with the Magical Eye and Peg Leg, to the Hogwarts infirmary to take a statement from Mad-Eye Mooney. She got everyone's attention and was about to administer the serum to Peter Pettigrew when Harry Potter interrupted her. Madam Bones. Peter Pettigrew was my parents' secret keeper. And he admitted it last year. If I could get Sirius Black to come in, would you guarantee his a fair hearing? Madam Bones heard Fudge off to the side blustering. Black confounded those 3 students. He was sent to Azkaban for good reason. But he was never given a trial. Madam Bond looked over at Fudge and Dumbledore and asked, is this true? Fudge looked sheepish and Dumbledore nodded to Amelia. Yes, I'm afraid. As you know, last year Mr. Black was caught here on Hogwarts grounds. Apparently the 3 students in the back heard Pettigrew confess and Mr. Black claimed he had had no trial. Minister Fudge demanded that he receive the kiss for escaping Azkaban immediately, but before it could be accomplished Mr. Black had escaped again. Amelia couldn't believe that a man had spent 12 years in Azkaban without a trial. Mr. Potter, if you can contact Mr. Black and if he is willing to submit to questioning under Veritaserum, I will guarantee that he will receive a fair hearing, and if innocent will be exonerated. Harry Potter nodded at her and started removing the leash from the dog at his knee. No one was more shocked than she when the dog morphed into the infamous Sirius Black. Minister Fudge started screaming that Black was to be sent back to Azkaban, but no one was listening to him. Dumbledore was sitting back with twinkling eyes, apparently amused by the whole thing. Severus Snape was looking at Sirius Black with loathing. Minerva looked as though she Old put the Death Eaters and the minister in detention for harming one of her cubs. Amelia's Aurors looked just as shocked as she was. Amos Diggory and his wife and son were looking at Sirius Black as though a demon had showed himself all of a sudden. The three students in the back didn't look surprised at all. Amelia could have made a point about harboring a fugitive, but if he was innocent, she didn't want to make a bad situation worse. Sirius Black addressed her. Madam Bones, I will submit to questioning under Veritaserum. He made his way to the binding chair that had formerly held Crouch Jr. She administered the Veritaserum and waited for it to take effect. What is your name? Sirius Orion Black. Are you a Death Eater? No. Are you a follower of he who must know be named? No. Were you the secret keeper for the Potters? No. I convinced them that I was too obvious and they secretly switched to Peter. Did you kill the 12 Muggles when confronting Peter Pettigrew? No. Peter caused an explosion to escape. Were you interviewed or given a trial after your arrest? No. Barty Crouch decided I was guilty and threw me into Azkaban. I was never questioned. Why did you escape Azkaban? To protect my godson. Quote. Why was he in danger? Fudge gave me a copy of the Daily Prophet when he was inspecting Azkaban and I saw a picture with Pettigrew in rat form on the front page. The article stated that the boy with him was a classmate of Harry's. I had to kill Pettigrew before he could harm Harry. Amelia administered the counter-agent. On behalf of the Ministry of Magic, I would like to apologize for a severe miscarriage of justice. I will work on your behalf to receive compensation for your illegal imprisonment. Any charges for escaping Azkaban will be dropped and any fee for being an unregistered animagus will be taken from the settlement. Thank you, Madam Bones. Cornelius, Albus. I expect full cooperation with the DMLE from the Minister of Magic and the head of the Wizenmaggot for a statement of exoneration and declaration of innocence for Mr. Black. She took a piece of parchment from Albus's desk and with her wand created such a declaration. Dumbledore just smiled at her and signed. But Fudge looked as though he had a bad case of constipation when he added his signature to the form. Madam Bones used a copying charm and created 5 copies, the original for Sirius Black. 1 copy for Dumbledore as the head of the Wizenmaggot, 1 for her files, 1 for Minister Fudge, another copy for Gringotts and a last one for the press. Sirius Black thanked her and whooped as he rushed to the back of the room to hug his godson. Finally, Amelia turned back to Pettigrew and administered the Veritaserum. What is your name? Peter Alfred Pettigrew. Are you a Death Eater? Yes. When did you become a Death Eater? August 1981. Were you the secret keeper for the Potters? Yes. Did you betray them to he who must not be named? Yes. Did you kill the 12 Muggles when confronted by Sirius Black? Yes. Why? To make my escape and to deflect blame to Sirius. How did you escape? I cut my finger off and transformed into my wormtail form to escape down a sewer. Where have you been for the last 13 years? I found a ministry worker's family to hide it to wait for when my master resurfaced. When I was found out, I found my master so that he could protect me. Were you involved in a plot to resurrect your master? Yes. What did you do? I kidnapped Bertha Jerkins when she recognized me and gave her to my master. I helped to Ubdue Mad Eye Mooney so that Barty could get into Hogwarts. I brewed the potion to restore my master according to his instructions. I gave my hand to the potion as part of the ritual. Amelia was even more appalled than she was when questioning Crouch. If this were true, the wizarding world was in for some very rough times, and Fudge had continually cut the funding from the Aurors. Apparently war as around the corner and there was very little time to prepare. It might take ousting Fudge to get things going right. She used Dumbledore's flow again to call 2 more Aurors to take away Pettigrew. At this rate, all of the Aurors on duty would be escorting prisoners tonight. When the 2 new Aurors arrived, they saw Sirius Black in the back of the room and started to move toward him. Amelia stopped, ped them and indicated Peter Pettigrew instead would be escorted to a holding cell. Harry Potter walked over to her and indicated that Ron Weasley would no longer be needed as he could only testify if needed for Sirius Black. She began to ask Albus to dismiss all the students except Potter, as she felt she had enough information without involving Diggory. As she was suggesting this, Potter had a request. Can Hermione Granger stay? He dropped his voice. If she doesn't find out soon what happened, she's going to explode on me, and I wouldn't want to be responsible for the cleanup after the destruction of the Gryffindor common room." Quote. Dumbledore twinkled some more. Harry wondered how he did that, some twinkling charm. And asked Sprout to escort Weasley and Diggory out. Mrs. Diggory was set to leave with Cedric. But Amos stayed behind as a department head in the ministry to get the rest of the story. Ron looked like he wanted to protest, but one look at McGonagall's face shut him up quick. As a last word, Dumbledore asked, "Oh, and Mr. Diggory and Mr. Weasley, if you could pass the word to your housemates that an announcement will be made tomorrow at lunch regarding the events of this evening. Professor Sprout, if you could inform a prefect from Ravenclaw and Slytherin as to this, as well as Professor Karkaroff and Headmistress Maxime the same, and that they may meet with me tomorrow around 11 o'clock to get the details beforehand. Tippy." All of a sudden a house elf appeared in front of the headmaster. "Please arrange guest chambers for Mrs. Molly Weasley and her son Mr. Bill Weasley if they would like to stay at the castle and escort them there. Inform our guests that Mr. Potter will be detained for a bit longer and that I am sure they will be able to get the details in the morning. Mr. and Mrs. Diggory, do you wish to stay in the castle tonight?" After they had indicated no, he dismissed the elf and Tippy nodded her head as she popped off to arrange things. Professor S.P. Rout left the room after a look at Minerva. Minerva nodded her head slightly to indicate that she would find her afterward to let her and Phileas in on the scoop. Pomona Sprout definitely wanted to get the details before all the rumors started. "Now, Mr. Potter, if you would recount the happenings of this night." In another part of the castle, Bill Weasley had just been shown quarters in the guest chambers at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. His mother had been upset at having been dismissed from her waiting by a house elf, but had left to Flo her husband that they would be staying at the castle and that she would let him know what was happening. He was thinking about all of the weird things that seemed to happen around Harry Potter. He had heard stories from his brother about the things that they had been involved in since first year. When he had met Harry before the World Cup, he had found him to be a somewhat shy individual who didn't seem to like the spotlight as much as his brother seemed to indicate. Harry definitely looked less shy why he had come back from wherever he went after the third task. Bill heard a whoosh as an owl came through the chimney at the firepole. Aeson landed on the desk in the guest chambers. His eyes widened as he saw that this was a special Gringotts owl. These particular owls were bred and trained for the highest security communications. They were specifically warded against tracking charms, trained to find their targets when they were alone, trained to pass through most wards undetectably, and trained to dodge any attempt to bring them down short of their target. They were a massively expensive form of communication and were only used by those willing to pay premium rates or by the Goblin leadership. He took the letter addressed to him and opened it. Mr. William Weasley, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Guest Quarters. Mr. Weasley, as an employee of Gringotts, this communique falls under your oath of secrecy to the bank. No one outside of those indicated within this letter may be informed of its contents or that such a communique has been delivered. Due to the nature of the events that you are attending and the results, you are charged with finding out any and all pertinent information as to the events of the Triwizard Tournament on June 24, 1995 and the involvement of Mr. Harry James Potter. No info. Our Mission Pass to Gringotts will be used against our client, Mr. Potter, and this information is specifically requested to aid Gringotts Bank to effectively serve our client. Any oaths of secrecy may be requested of you should be worded in such a way that the information divulged can be passed on to be used to aid Gringotts in their service to their depositors. Should there be any significant effect on Mr. Potter in his status as a client of this bank or on any other client, Mr. Potter should be invited to meet with myself at his earliest opportunity. No one other than Mr. Potter and T.Os that he chooses to inform may be apprised of this request. Please ask him to contact me at his earliest convenience to go over any matters that should arise. For successful completion of this task, an amount of G500 will be added to your account. Should you fail to complete this task, your employment will be reviewed with a possible consequence of termination. Please come directly to me with pertinent information by 1600 on June 26, 1995. May profits be increased and our enemies destroyed. Ragnarok. Director, Gringotts Bank. Chief of the Goblin Nation. Bill looked at his letter and his only thought was, the shite is about to be hit by the blasting hex. Harry moved to the front of the room. He looked at the headmaster and then at the restraint chairs. The headmaster nodded and changed them into 2 more plush overstuffed chairs. Dumbledore was thinking about offering lemon drops. He could really use one right about now. Hermione was on information overload. Her faith in Harry, however, had been vindicated. The rest of the student body could no longer look at him askance, thinking he had cheated his way into the tournament. She followed him up to the other chair and sat down. She wasn't going to go anywhere until she knew everything and that Harry was all right. McGonagall was looking positively miffed by the dangers that one of her cubs had been put through. That barmy old cod. Jeer would learn what happened when he failed to protect one of her cubs. Amelia looked very interested in seeing what Harry had to say. She had plans percolating in her head. So far tonight, she had found out about corruption by Barty Crouch Sr., and how much had his assistant Percy Weasley known. A cover-up by Cornelius Fudge. Oh, she couldn't wait to present that to the Wizenmaggot harboring. A fugitive by Harry Potter. Not that that really mattered anymore. Sirius Black hadn't even been given a trial. And a plan to resurrect Voldemort by supposed order of Merlin holder Peter Pettigrew that was going to go away. Amos Diggory finally understood why his son had refused to badmouth Potter about the tournament. He really had nothing to do with entering. He was going to have to work hard to make up for the comments he had made to other ministry workers about the boy. If he ever found out about those comments, he'd have to offer a formal apology to the boy who lived, and the political fallout wouldn't be pleasant. Sirius was sitting in the back ecstatic over his written declaration. He was going to get custody of his godson. And that he was going to plan some pranks with Remus on Fudge, Snape, Dumbledore and anyone else involved in his illegal incarceration and the mistreatment of his pup that he could get a hold of. Kingsley Shacklebolt was sitting waiting for the other shoe to drop. So far his department had come out looking like complete fools. Apparently, before he had been relieved by Dawlish, Barty Crouch Jr. had been found to have been holed up with his father for the last 10 years. Sirius Black had been in Azkaban for 12 years without a trial and had been running around as an animagus. Peter Pettigrew had been given a bogus award, and there was still more to go. Nymphadora, just call me Tonks. Tonks couldn't wait to contact her mother. Apparently her favorite cousin, Sirius Black, had been innocent all this time, and now there was proof. Sirius was now in Lee Nay to head the Black family and could reinstate them to the family name. She had always wondered what had transpired all those years ago. It had been one of the reasons she had become an Auror, to help her mother find information and closure after Sirius had been convicted. Hell, he wasn't even convicted apparently, just chucked into that hell hole. Rita Skeeter was upset to find herself in a jar in Harry Potter's robe. She wasn't that upset though. The information being talked about here was surefire front page news for a long time. And for some reason she had a front row seat. The boy who lived apparently had figured out her animagus form. She was surprised that he hadn't informed Amelia Bones yet. Maybe if she made a good enough deal, she wouldn't end up in Azkaban and paying a huge fine for being an unregistered animagus. Both myself and Cedric had found ourselves at the end having fought off an Acromatula together. We decided to take the cup together when someone fired a stupefy hex at Cedric. I returned fire toward the area it had come from. I then saw the severed leg of the Acromatula that had come off in the fight with it. I decided to hastily collect the blood to ask Professor Snape if it had any uses in potions. At this, Professor Snape looked at him with a weird expression. It took a person with good potions instinct to automatically collect possible ingredients. There were a few antivenom potions that could use the blood of an Acromatula. Well, there were some dark potions as well, but he didn't want to think about those. After I had transfigured a pouch to hold the blood and collected it, I placed it against my arm so that it wouldn't fall out of my pocket. I then moved back to Cedric and the cup. As Cedric and I had agreed to take it together and Cedric was 2 feet from it, I decided to place his hand on the cup at the same time that I did. Amos Diggory was surprised. Such loyalty and fair play was a Hufflepuff trait, not a Gryffindor one. He would definitely have to work to counteract his comments at the ministry now. All of a sudden, the cup activated. I thought that maybe the cup was set to take the winner to the judge's booth, so I wasn't worried. But all of a sudden, I found that we were in a graveyard. I set Cedric down with the cup and borrowed his wand in case something happened and I was attacked and disarmed. Quick thinking was Amelia's thought. She thought that Harry should have revived Diggory, but all in all good thinking for a 14-year-old boy. Shortly after I moved away, I was overcome by pain in my scar. This hadn't happened this heavily since I fought Voldemort in first year. All around the room, everyone except the professors were shocked. Amelia wondered why she hadn't heard about this before. Susan had warned Harry Potter having been in the hospital wing after a deranged teacher had attacked him, but no one had ever mentioned Voldemort. Fudge, who had been apprised of it, had felt that this information was unimportant as he had reportedly been driven off and there was no proof anyway. Amos Diggory was floored. No wonder this young man had been able to tie with his son for the Triwizard Cup. Sirius wondered why Remus hadn't told him about this, and if he had even known, someone was hiding details on this and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. Aurors Shacklebolt and Tonks were just odd. I fell to the ground and tried to push the pain out of my head. All of a sudden the pain stopped, but I was too exhausted to react quickly. Hermione looked at him and realized his scar had faded. Harry, your scar, it's almost gone. Dumbledore looked shocked. He had detected the soul fragment many years ago that resided behind Harry's scar. Apparently, by a sheer force of will, the fragment had been expelled. This changed everything if this were true. He'd have to examine the boy in the hospital wing soon. If this was the case, all of his plans would have to be changed and Harry would have to be apprised of the prophecy very soon. It wasn't a bad thing, but never would he have thought that a 14-year-old boy could overcome such a thing so easily. The boy just might have a chance. Harry knew Dumbledore had seen the change in his scar. He hoped that this time the barmy headmaster would now be more forthcoming, as his "go and get killed" plan would no longer work. Before I go further, and I just put the rest of the memory in Professor Dumbledore's pensieve and show everyone what happened, and I can answer questions afterwards. Amelia consulted with Dumbledore and agreed. Harry concentrated on the memory from the point that he had been found by Wormtail. He didn't really want to have to explain all of his actions beforehand, especially stupefying Cedric. As the scene played out, he could hear breaths being held and violently expelled. He felt Hermione's grip on his arm tighten as Wormtail had stabbed him with the knife. The people around the room were in awe of what he had seen and his quick thinking in escaping with Wormtail, as well as what he had noticed when he had returned. Good situational awareness, was Kingsley's Shacklebolt's comment. When the memory had played out until they had passed into Hogwarts, everyone around the room looked at Harry with a bit of awe as he laid out the wands he had summoned in front of Amelia Bones. Mr. Potter, you said that the blood on your arm wasn't yours. Amelia asked. Yeah, well, that was where I had put the Acromatula blood. I guess Wormtail never noticed when he tried to prick me with the dagger. Can we look at the resurrected form of Voldemort once more? Professor Dumbledore tapped the pensieve with his wand and the room once again looked at the resurrected form of Voldemort with morbid fascination. Harry wondered if Voldemort would be able to get any of his followers back as mutant Spider-Man. Dumbledore decided to dismiss Harry at this point. Well, my boy, well done. Even though Voldemort was resurrected, it was to an imperfect form. You should go off to the hospital wing for a checkup by Madame Pomfrey. Maybe Ms. Granger would like to accompany you. Here is a note to prevent any distractions from prefects and the caretaker. He added as he handed him a parchment slip. Amelia looked at Harry with some thought. Mr. Potter, we will be reviewing this and making plans. Before you leave, is there anything that you need? Well, since my godfather has been freed, I'd like to be able to move in with him. Dumbledore interrupted. Well, we will discuss that among other things. I and Mr. Black will see you tomorrow morning after breakfast. If you are still in the hospital wing, we will talk there. Otherwise, please come to my office straight after breakfast at 9 o'clock. Oh, and please keep tonight's events to yourself until after the announcements tomorrow at lunchtime. Harry deliberately grabbed Hermione's hand as they made their way to Madame Pomfrey's house of torture. He hated staying in the hospital wing. Hermione looked at him and smiled, thankful for the contact. She had watched the scene play out with trepidation and was so relieved that Harry had made it out alive. Can we stop off somewhere before the hospital wing? I have something to do. Sure. Hermione was confused but allowed herself to be led to an empty classroom. Harry set up a locking and silencing charm on the door and the windows and pulled out the jar with Rita Skeeter and handed it to her. I remembered what you said before the task earlier and realized what you had realized. Say hello to Rita Skeeter. What do you say we talk to her? Hermione, who remembered having come to the realization earlier about how Rita had gotten all of her stories, looked at the bug with a sense of satisfaction. Rita, say hello to my friend Hermione. The one who you made rumors about for the last several months. I'm thinking of giving you to her as a present. What do you think? Rita was terrified. She was in a tight predicament. And the way Hermione was looking at her, things could be getting even worse. She was flying around madly in the jar hoping for escape. Now, Hermione, what should I do with her? Should I turn her over to Madame Bones as an unregistered animagus? I think she just mentioned that there were fines involved. Yes, Harry. Fines and a sentence in Azkaban for some months. It's an interesting possibility. Maybe we can come to an agreement though. What do you think? Oh well, if you think so. Otherwise, I could have her as a pet for the summer. The jar would fit well on my bookcase. Well, let's see what Rita has to say. Harry set the jar down as Hermione pulled her wand. Harry unscrewed the cap and pointed his own wand at Rita. If you come out and talk, I promise I won't hex you and turn you over to the DMLE willy-nilly. Quote. Rita Skeeter flew out of the jar and even though she was tempted to try to escape, the wands pointing at her never lost track of her. She turned back to her human form. What do you want? Well, in exchange for not turning you over to Madame Bones, I want a witch's oath to not report anything untrue or damaging about myself, my friend Hermione, my godfather or Amelia Bones or her family. Harry already had plans to get Fudge sacked and if he threw his name behind Amelia, maybe he could get a fair minister elected. Rita thought about this. What about the others? Such as Dumbledore and Fudge. Quote. Hermione looked at Rita about the include Dumbledore, but Harry beat her to it. Well, as long as you print the truth without slanting it, you can say whatever you like. This will be in effect until Voldemort is finally defeated once and for all. Hermione thought about this. Since Dumbledore hadn't done anything wrong, she thought this was sufficient. How little she knew. Well, that could take years. How am I supposed to be a reporter if I can't write what I want? Well, I could sweeten the pot a little. How about I promise you 2 exclusive interviews in the next 12 months? One by September 1st of the next school year, and the next by the end of the next school year. And I will convince my godfather to give you an interview. Rita looked excited. Sure, she would have to be careful. But she would avoid Azkaban and with exclusive interviews from the boy who lived in Sirius Black, her name would be a household word. Okay, I agree. She pulled out her wand carefully, mindful of the 2 wands that had her covered, and made the oath that Harry had specified. In exchange for exclusive interviews from Harry Potter and Sirius Black, she would not publish anything untrue or damaging about the Harry, Hermione, Sirius, Amelia Bones or any of their families. She would only publish things about the others involved that were true. Harry nodded his head satisfied. Well, since we know that you have an exclusive story that you witnessed tonight, I know you want to get to your office as quickly as possible. Just remember your oath. I will contact you later as to the interviews. Rita changed into her beetle form and flew off once Harry opened the door. He pulled Hermione along toward the infirmary. Hermione looked at Harry and wondered what had come over him. She was expecting him to be moody and annoyed but was in complete control. Harry, I want to thank you for what you did for me in there. Hermione, you never have to thank me for protecting you. After all this time, I think you should know that. Hermione bowed her head and blushed as Harry grabbed her hand again. Hermione, if I move in with Sirius over the summer, I'd like your help in doing some things. Hermione looked excited at this. I have to buy a new wardrobe that doesn't consist of my cousin's hand-me-downs, and I need to set up some things that I will need your advice on. Hermione got very excited, although she was a little uncertain. Harry was asking her for help that had nothing to do with school work. She was a very good planner, but this was the first time that he had asked for help that had nothing to do with books. Of course I will help you. But won't you be doing such thing with Sirius? And what about the Weasleys? I'm sure Mrs. Weasley would be better at picking out clothes, she has 5 sons. Well, Sirius will probably be busy setting up things for a while before he is ready to have me move in. Sirius has been out of circulation and neither he nor Mrs. Weasley has any familiarity with Muggle clothes. I'd like to look good for a girl I'm interested in. Hermione was a little bit sad about this. She had harbored a secret crush on her best friend for a while. But she would do whatever it took to make sure he was happy. So I thought I would ask the girl I'm interested in to help me look good for her. Hermione was gobsmacked. Harry was interested in her. A warm feeling exploded out of her stomach and she stared at him. Come on, Hermione. Say something. I'm dying here. Would you possibly be interested in being my girlfriend? Harry looked at her with puppy dog eyes. Really? You want to go out with me? But what about those other girls that are always watching you? Most of them are very pretty, and I'm. Harry stopped her with a finger against her mouth. All of those other girls don't know a thing about me. Why would I be interested in them, when I'm interested in the most intelligent, beautiful girl I know, who has never abandoned me? Even when everyone else had. Hermione was about to melt. No one had ever called her beautiful. Victor had seemed interested in her, but they had decided to just be pen pals as she did. In TC him as more than a friend and long-distance relationships were too hard, even with magic. Ron had always reacted jealous about any guy that looked at her, but she felt a little too much like he was trying to own her. She threw her arms around Harry and gave him the hardest hug she could. Yes, was all she could say as her thought processes ran away from her. Well, after I get checked out in the hospital wing and get cleaned up a bit so that I'm not quite so icky, would you give me the honor of giving me my first kiss ever? It was all Hermione could do to not drag him into a broom closet and snog him senseless. Icky clothes or not, Harry Potter reviewed the last several hours in his head. He was well on his way to fixing several of the problems that he had started with when he had visited Bob. Larry had been right. Bob was one sneaky bastard. The plans that he had enacted with Bob's suggestions for the resurrection of Voldemort had worked to a T. Voldemort had returned, but with a hideously malformed body. He didn't have his wand and until he could get to a wandmaker that wouldn't lock him out as he wouldn't have one to force his way in. Voldemort could not take the chance of collecting his followers until he had a wand and a glamour charm and that still didn't handle the deformed arms. He might take a chance with killing himself again but would have to wait for another follower to find him. The marked Death Eaters would have felt the dark mark reforming would be on edge when they hadn't been called immediately. Which would make them very nervous as Voldemort as not one to wait to glory in his power over others. That they hadn't been called could mean that he was unhappy with them and was making plans to make his displeasure felt. He had gotten Crouch and Wormtail caught and questioned under Veritaserum with Amelia as witness before Fudge could hush it up or interfere with his Dementor guard. As a bonus, he had Sirius questioned at the same time and High's release was impossible to avoid in front of so many witnesses. He had hamstrung Dumbledore's plan for his demise by walking in front of a killing curse. Dumbledore had obviously been changing his mindset when Harry had been dismissed. He had taken the opportunity to blackmail Rita Skeeter earlier than expected. He knew he would have the chance, he didn't think it would be this quick. And, best of all, he had asked Hermione to be his girlfriend and received enthusiastic agreement. The kiss he had shared with Hermione after Poppy Pomfrey had incarcerated him in the infirmary once again was sweet and held the promise of more to come. Even the hospital wing's dungeon mistress couldn't help but smile when she had seen the interaction of the two teens after his examination. Hermione had left afterwards with a promise to keep things to herself until the whole story broke and attention would be diverted. Harry had promised to make it up to her after convincing her that he was not ashamed at all to have her as a girlfriend. Hermione, rational girl that she was, could see the arguments that he had made had validity and was intrigued by his promise. Snogging Harry had made it to the top of her list of favorite activities. Even above studying 1 year ahead in her texts. A shopping spree to a bookstore might be the only activity that would tie for the top spot. Harry hoped to avoid a conference rotation with the Weasleys until after the whole mutant Spider-Man being resurrected thing had been sorted out with the ministry and press. Even if they didn't actually announce it, now trustworthy Opal in positions of authority knew the truth, and that would mean he could hopefully avoid the constant harassment he had endured all of 5th year. There were no guarantees though. So he would have tea. Oh, see how much he couldn't avoid and plan for it. He'd have to get serious to take a Wizenmaggot seat sooner rather than later. Harry fell asleep in the infirmary, visions of wild exciting hair and chocolate eyes filling his dreams. The next morning he woke up early. Madame Pomfrey bustled over to him and started waving her wand over him. He waited for the diagnosis. Poppy pronounced him fit if he w. Old and sure that he got sufficient rest over the next several days. Harry waited until Cedric had been checked out also, so they could walk out of the infirmary together. Anything to deflect attention on himself was a good thing. As they left the infirmary, Harry told Cedric that announcements would be made at lunch and to keep the aftermath to himself until after that. He had reaffirmed that they had tied for the win and asked Cedric if he would tell people about the maze. Harry figured if Cedric told people, they would fawn over him instead. Cedric knew Harry enough by now to realize that eternal glory wasn't his thing. They talked about not mentioning details about what happened at the cup and to refer people to Professor Dumbledore and Amelia Bones. Harry made his way to the Gryffindor common room and saw that no one was up yet except Hermione, who was sitting by the fire reading a book and looking happy. As Hermione looked up, she saw Harry come into the common room and with a quick Kay looked to make sure they were alone still she ran over and kissed him with enthusiasm. Harry laughed and hugged her for a moment. "How are you doing? How is Cedric? Did you get cleared by Madame Pomfrey to leave the infirmary? I was paroled for good behavior and am under probation to rest sufficiently for the next few days. Cedric is fine and also was released. And how are you today, my lovely bookworm?" Hermione smiled at him. Unlike Ron, when he made jokes about her reading, Harry's comments had no derision whatsoever. All Hermione could say was, "Happy. Totally and completely happy. Well, love, I am going to shower and head to breakfast. Would you like to come with me? You think you can keep the glow to a minimum for the last few days of this term?" Hermione laughed and nodded enthusiastically. They headed up to their respective dormitories to get ready for the day. When Harry got to his room, he saw that the other people in the room were stirring. Neville saw him and let out a shout. "Harry, how are you? What happened?" Neville's shout got the attention of the rest of the dorm, except Ron, who slept through it. "Here, let me wake up the noise machine and I'll tell you what I can." Harry got an idea. He moved close to Ron's bed, moved his mouth close to his ear but not close enough to get hit if Ron moved suddenly, and yelled out, "Bacon and eggs." Ron jumped in bed and looked around. He saw Harry and the rest of the dorm laughing their heads off. "Hey mate, thanks for the wake-up call. How are you?" "Well, as I was about to tell these other fine gentlemen, I'm okay. I've been released by the mistress of the infirmary and it has been confirmed that I tied with Cedric for the win." "Wow, that's great. Just think of how the rest of the school will react when they found out you won. You'll be able to bag any bird." Harry just shook his head. Ron would never get it. Harry headed off to the shower to get ready. As he was the most alert, he was the first one done and headed down to meet up with Hermione. As they arrived at the Great Hall, he could see that there were few students who had arrived yet. As the hall filled up, the stares he received were becoming annoying. As Cedric entered the hall, everyone moved their attention to him as he walked over to Harry to clap him on the back. "How are you doing, my fine company champion?" Everyone looked at them with surprise on their face. "I'm doing well, my esteemed company champion. Maybe you could regale our fellow students regarding our victory." Cedric laughed and agreed. As he moved over to the Hufflepuff table, Mo, Saint of the students, followed him to hear the details. Ron, who had arrived just before, looked at him perplexed, not understanding why he hadn't given to details to everyone himself. When the Durmstrang and Beauxbaton's contingents arrived, Harry made it a point to get up and walk over to Victor Crumb and Fleur Delacour and find out how they were doing, congratulate them on competing well. Victor looked at Harry and could see that Harry was not throwing his win in his face but was genuine. "I am Vel. Congratulations on a nice win." Harry chatted with Victor for a moment and then moved to Fleur. Fleur also could see that Harry was genuinely concerned and was not affected by her Vila allure. They chatted for a few minutes until Fleur was distracted all of a sudden. Harry looked over in awe to himself as he saw Bill Weasley enter with his mother. Harry moved over to the Weasleys, preparing himself for the over-enthusiastic mothering that was coming. Ron, the twins and Ginny joined her. As she greeted Harry with a sob in her overbearing manner. Hermione looked on, shaking her head. "Oh, Harry, how are you doing? It was just terrible what happened last night. Are you hurt?" "What happened?" Harry, after he escaped her arms, told her that there would be announcements at lunch but that she could get the details from Professor Dumbledore, as he himself had been asked to keep it quiet until after the announcements. Let the barmy codger deal with Mrs. Weasley's harping for a while. The twins congratulated him enthusiastically as they had heard a rumor that he had tied with Cedric. Ginny hugged Harry and congratulated him, holding the hug a little too long. Hermione narrowed her eyes when she saw that. She could see that it wasn't Harry's fault. She started making plans to discourage a certain red-headed fangirl. As the rest of the Weasley brood moved off, Bill could see from the evasive answers and the tenseness of the few professors present that something was up. He made a judgment call and quietly asked Harry to speak to him sometime this morning. Harry could see that Bill was trying to be discreet and nodded to him as Bill moved off to congratulate Cedric. After breakfast, Harry left to meet with Sirius and Dumbledore, after letting Hermione know what was happening. Hermione had invited him to stay at her house that summer if she could get permission from her parents. Harry thought that this fell right into his plans for the summer and agreed enthusiastically, making plans in his head to get Dumbledore to agree. Hermione asked permission to use Hedwig to send a message off to her parents. As Harry assented, Hermione had torn off to the Ollery to send the message before her trip to the library to revise for her remaining exams. She invited Harry to come and find her when he was free. Harry knew that the exams were being copy-templated over the next few days, although he didn't have to attend. He thought he might take some of the exams anyway, but any excuse used to avoid Snape and Trelawney shouldn't be ignored. Although, with the 2 years extra of potions under his belt, taking the potions exam anyway wouldn't be difficult and it would stick in Snape's craw a bit. Snape, he now knew, really was on the side against Voldemort, but he still was a miserable bastard, and Harry decided to be overly respectful to annoy the greasy git. After a year in a tent and battling with Voldemort, Snape didn't even come close to being as annoying as he used to think he was. Harry entered Dumbledore's office to meet up about what was to happen. "Ah, my boy, please come and have a seat. I was discussing with Sirius your summer accommodations." "Oh, good. Anything to get away from Azkaban. My boy, some caution needs to be employed. As I was explaining to Sirius, there are good and sufficient reasons for you to spend some time each summer at home with your relatives." "By Merlin, why would I want to do that? I absolutely hate it there. I haven't considered that place home for the last 3 years." Harry yelled out. It was still part of the plan. Harry had learned in his past life that stating it wasn't his home would have negative side effects on the wards, which after all only protected the property and his relatives, and not really himself. Albus looked at him in shock as Sirius looked at Albus with a vindicated smirk on his face. At the same time, one of the instruments on one of the shelves in the office let off a puff of black smoke which died away. "Now, Albus, will you listen to me? If I have a choice, Harry will never set foot in that place at all." Albus just shook his head, wondering what calamity would happen next. "Very well. We shall have to find some alternate accommodations for the first 2 weeks of the holiday till the paperwork can be submitted to the ministry and Sirius has made arrangements. Possibly the Weasleys. Well, if it's all the same to you, Hermione has invited me over to her house this summer. She has asked her parents to get permission. If she does, can wards be set up at her house to keep her and her family protected while I am there?" Sirius replied with a whistle. "Moving fast, pup. Huh." RRY just blushed and looked at his godfather with a withering stare. Sirius laughed. "If her parents agree, I'll contact Gringotts to set up wards on her property. I have to go there anyway to sort out my status after being declared free by the ministry." Albus wanted to object, as he didn't want anyone to know where Harry would be other than himself and those he trusted, but even he had to conclude that goblin-made wards were possibly the best choice with what time they had available. He himself would be too busy to cast the wards. As long as he was keyed in, goblin wards would suffice. "If I could suggest, please keep your whereabouts known to as few people as possible. With the return of Voldemort, Even with his limitations, it would be best if as few people as possible knew where you will be residing at any given moment. Quote. Harry happily agreed. This meant that he wouldn't have to tell Ron or the Weasleys and that he could get a number of issues resolved before dealing with the blow-up. Sirius, can I speak to you privately for a moment? Albus explained that he had to make arrangements for his next meeting and that they could speak privately in his office for a few moments before Albus and Sirius could plan the rest of the arrangements. Harry watched Albus leave the office, and erected a muffaliato charm. Sirius raised his eyebrows at Harry. He didn't know that Harry knew this spell, it wasn't very common. Harry looked at Sirius with a laugh and explained, I don't know if Professor Dumbledore has any monitoring charms set on his office, and what I have to ask you is very quiet. It has to do with a good prank. He watched Sirius, his face lit up at the thought that his godson was continuing with the tradition of the Marauders. I have a request and an investment opportunity that I would like you to take. Sirius looked surprised. Investment opportunity? What is it, how much and why don't you invest yourself? Harry grinned at him as he replied, well, considering the people involved worship the ground the Marauders walk on, I thought that it would mean more if it came from you. It's for a joke shop. The people are geniuses and will make you a lot of money. Sirius looked very excited. More about the pranks than the money. Well, after your pardon is announced, I want you to meet my friends, Fred and George Weasley, better known as Gred and Forge. Harry found Bill outside watching Hagrid talking to some students who were probably working on preparing for their exams. Hello, Bill. You mentioned you wanted to see me. Bill Weasley pointed toward the lake and said, yes. Let's go for a short walk. As they walked toward the lake, Harry saw Bill glancing around to make sure they were alone. Harry pulled out his wand and cast a muffaliato. As I can see that you want this to remain private. The spell I used will cause anyone and anything else to hear a buzzing noise. We are completely private. Handy spell that. You'll have to teach me that one. I have been asked, as an employee of Gringotts, to find out any information about what happened last night. I was also asked to inform you that this information will not be used in any way against you. And that it will be kept completely confidential. Harry looked at Bill, realizing the enormous potential of this. In the last timeline, he had run afoul of the goblins' customs, leading to a lot of trouble and having to break into Gringotts Bank. He'd like to avoid that if he could. With that in mind, Harry spent the next half an hour telling Bill about everything. Bill looked at Harry with a bit of awe. No matter how many stories Ron told of their adventures, hearing one firsthand was an eye-opener. At the end Bill could only shake his head. This definitely fell under the letter that he had received. He took on an official expression. As an employee of Gringotts Bank, I have been directed to invite you to meet with Director Ragnarok of Gringotts Bank at your earliest convenience. Bill's face took on a more normal look and he followed this up with, I suggest you do this as soon as possible. When the director of Gringotts says your earliest convenience, what he really means is that the longer you wait, the less happy he will be. So that means, at your earliest convenience, if you understand what I mean. Now, as he has made the request, it isn't an insult if you don't show right up. But you want to visit as soon after the end of term as possible. Also, you can bring anybody you trust, but don't tell anyone outside of those people. Even Dumbledore or McGonagall. Harry thought for a moment. I plan to bring Sirius Black as my godfather and wizarding guardian. I also plan on bringing Hermione Granger as my advisor. She is also, although she doesn't know it yet, my intended. Bill's eyebrows rose. Ginny and his mother were going to be disappointed, but because of the oath he had taken, he couldn't even hint to them the information that he had just received. The Hogwarts Express leaves on the 30th. I will attempt to visit Gringotts Bank on the 1st of July at 1400. If there are any problems with that, please have Gringotts contact me. If I have any problems with that, I will inform you as soon as possible. Sometime this week, Sirius will visit Gringotts on my behalf to arrange wards for Hermione's parents' house as it is likely that I will be visiting her for at least the first few weeks of summer. Who should I have him contact? Bill thought about it. Even though it wasn't Harry directly, Ragnarok would most likely prefer to see him directly if it involved Harry as the goblins seemed very interested in meeting with him. Have him go to a teller and say, on behalf of Harry James Potter, I request a meeting with Gringotts representative. By tomorrow morning, I will have informed Ragnarok and arrangements will be made. Does that work? Harry nodded. He would have to plan on getting Sirius on board with some things, but if he finessed it right, he could get someone else to take care of the Horcruxes. He shook Bill's hand and left to go meet up with Hermione in the library. At least the chance of catching the attention of the redheads was very small. After spending an enjoyable hour with Hermione in the library, they packed up and went to lunch. Apparently, with the anticipation of the announcements to be made, the whole student body had arrived on time for lunch, a very unusual occurrence for a Sunday. As food arrived, the students assumed the announcements would happen at the end of lunch and started to dig in. After half an hour, a ting could be heard. Everyone looked to the head table as Professor McGonagall was tapping her glass to get everyone's attention. Headmaster Dumbledore stood up and nodded to her. The students no T.C.E.D. There were several people in addition to the normal professors at the table. Hello and thank you Professor McGonagall. First I would like to announce the winners of the Triwizard Cup, Cedric Diggory and Harry Potter. Dumbledore indicated them with his hands and the applause around the room grew as both stood up and bowed, and then retook their seats. Having saved each other in the final task, the two competitors decided to take the cup together. Unfortunately, there was a kidnapping plot that was exposed and the two competitors were whisked away to an undisclosed location. Due to the quick thinking of one of the competitors, the ploy was defeated and two perpetrators were exposed and apprehended by the DMLE. Under questioning with Veritaserum, one of the kidnappers was revealed to be Peter Pettigrew. Shortly thereafter, Sirius Black turned himself in to be questioned under Veritaserum as well. Through these means, Sirius Black was exonerated and Peter Pettigrew now resides under the auspices of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Mr. Black, Dumbledore pointed to one of the new people at the table. Gasps could be heard throughout the hall. Dumbledore waited for the hubbub to settle down and continued. Mr. Black, having been proven guiltless of the crimes of which he was accused and never having received a trial, gasps were heard again, received a statement of exoneration and declaration of innocence. At that time, Professor Moody was discovered to have been attacked and one of the perpetrators took his place. This person also admitted under Veritaserum that he had entered Mr. Potter's name without any other student or professor being aware of it. Professor Moody was freed and is now recovering. Because of this, further exams, other than OWL and NEWT examinations, as well as classes for defense against the dark arts have been cancelled for the rest of the term. Tonight, after a feast, the presentation for the Triwizard Tournament will be held. We will expect all students to attend. Thank you. As soon as he finished, owls by the dozens entered the Great Hall as though they had been being held back beforehand. Many copies of the Daily P. Rofet were delivered as well as personal mail. All around the room, students were gathered around to read the headlines. Sirius Black innocent. Peter Pettigrew alive and in custody. Death Eater found at Hogwarts. How much did Dumbledore know? Bones gets the truth, Fudge covers up. 2-tie for Triwizard. Win for Hogwarts. Harry thought that Rita had done a credible job. He was sure that news would be the talk of the school for the next few days. No announcement about Voldemort, but did it really matter? Harry made his way up to Sirius. Well, after lunch, can I talk to you about some things? Sure, pup. So where are these two pranksters that you talked about? Harry turned toward the Gryffindor table. Oi, Fred and George. Fred and George looked up from a copy of the Daily Prophet and moved over to him. I would like to introduce you to my godfather, Sirius Black, better known to his friends as Padfoot. George and Fred looked gobsmacked and bowed down on both knees saying, "We are not worthy. We are not worthy." Professor McGonagall looked on, torn between amusement and downright terror at what the devious duo might learn from a marauder. Amelia Bones, another guest at the head table, moved down the table to speak to Harry. Mr. Potter, the headlines of the Daily Prophet are quite interesting. Did you inform anybody of what happened last night? Harry replied straight away. The only people who knew the details were present last night when it all was happening. I didn't speak about it to anyone else, except one person who is under an oath of secrecy. Amelia looked curious as to the identity of the other person, but if they were under a secrecy oath, they could not be responsible. Very well. If at all possible, I would like additional information on some of the revelations that occurred. Can we arrange something for after the holiday starts? Harry thought about it. My holiday plans are up in the air, but I could make time the first Monday after the term ends, July 3rd. Does that work? Amelia thought about it. She hoped that the blow-ups would hold till then. With so many revelations being made so quickly, she might not have as much time as she thought. But a week should be sufficient and not overly long. I will tell you the details soon. Amelia moved off to talk to the others that had been present, trying to find out who had talked and what had been said. As Harry moved back toward the Gryffindor table, he was accosted by the ferret with his bodyguards of Tweedledee and Tweedledum. "Hey, Potter, couldn't even get the win without help from a Hufflepuff." Draco Malfoy smirked at him, and Crabbe and Goyle laughed. "Well, considering I fought off an Acromatula attacking Cedric and it was my idea to take it together, your comments have no meaning. I have no interest in your inbred and juvenile attitude." Draco snarled at him. "Why, you pathetic half-blood." He went to grab his wand, but all of a sudden a disarming jinx came from an unexpected quarter. Sirius walked over to Draco and his goons. "As head of House Black, I will be contacting head of House Malfoy for the unprovoked attack on my ward by the scion of House Malfoy. I will expect a formal apology. Please inform your mother, Narcissa Black Malfoy, that her head of house will expect to be contacted as regards this as well." Draco, from his position on the floor, looked up at Sirius with wide eyes. This wasn't a professor who was intimidated by his name, but a pureblood head of an ancient and most noble house who could create many problems for his father and himself. Draco nodded his head and scurried away, just like a ferret, was Harry's thought with his goons right behind him. "Pup, I see that I will have to teach you some customary usages. After the paperwork moves through the ministry, we will have to have some lessons on pureblood politics." Harry, not having seen the power of ancient and noble houses in quite this way before, thought that this was a good idea. Potter was, apparently, a name just as old or older than any other, and he hadn't taken this into account in his plans. Things might be better than expected. "Thanks, Sirius. I look forward to the lessons. That toe rag has made my life hell for 4 years, and I'm getting tired of it." Sirius nodded his head. Now that he was back in the game, he had to make some plans and handle some family business. "Sirius, can I talk to you privately for a moment?" Sirius agreed and indicated the door. "Hold on a minute." Harry walked over to where Hermione had been watching from the Gryffindor table. Ron was distracted with the twins and Ginny looking over the Daily Prophet, and they didn't see this. As they moved onto the grounds, Harry brought up the meetings that had been requested. "Sirius, Hermione, I was contacted by a Gringotts representative for a meeting the day after term ends. I was asked to keep this to myself except those that I trusted and wanted to advise me. The 2 names that I gave were you two. So, do you think if your parents approve my visiting, can we arrange the meeting in Diagon Alley at 2 in the afternoon on the day after term ends?" Sirius, who knew customs very well, answered with, "Of course, pup. When I go to Gringotts this week I can set the stage." The representative of Gringotts mentioned that, "When you arrive, go to a teller and say, on behalf of Harry James Potter, I request a meeting with Gringotts representative. It's what I arranged to get things sorted out. Apparently, a very important level goblin will meet with you. I have a promise hat nothing that comes from the meeting will be used against me." Hermione's eyes widened at this. This visit was way more important than Harry seemed to be making it. Harry had never really concentrated in history of magic, but she had, and she understood the importance of the goblins making the request. "Harry, are you sure you want me there? Goblins have a lot of customs that you have to be careful of." Harry nodded. "That's why I want you both there. Sirius knows pureblood politics and you pay way more attention than me and can advise me much better than if I tried to do it myself. So will you two please come?" Harry hit her with his puppy dog eyes. "Only you, Harry Potter," Hermione said while shaking her head. She would never be able to say no when if looked at her like that. "Of course we'll come. When Hedwig gets back with my parents' permission, they'll never say no to me about a friend visiting. We'll send them a message so that they won't make other plans for that day for us." Harry explained that no one other than the 2 of them were to even know where he was. "That means that Ron can't know I'm at your house, for security reasons. Can you imagine him keeping it to himself?" Hermione laughed. "Ron couldn't keep a secret if his life depended on it, he's almost as bad as Hagrid." Hermione was enjoying this very much. Harry had shown her that he trusted her much more than their red-headed friend, and she couldn't argue the logic. Besides, the way that Ron and Ginny were looking at them made her certain that the less they knew the better. She loved the Weasleys, but they surely complicated things. Sirius looked to how the two teens interacted and was reminded how well Lily and James interacted well, in 7th year after James had settled down and stopped being a pain when chasing her. "All right, Sirius. I'll talk to you later about these things. Just make sure you wait until at least tomorrow morning for Gringotts to work out the details. Now, Hermione, I decided to take some exams anyway. Even though I don't have to. Do you want to help me revise for them?" Hermione squealed and started dragging him off to the library. The last week of school flew by. After a ceremony to award the Triwizard Cup and a feast, the business of exams took over the school. Ron had objected when Harry had told him he was taking the exams anyway, not understanding why he wouldn't take the free pass. Ron didn't know what happened, but Harry seemed less interested in chess and exploding snap and more interested in studying. It was very odd. It was almost like he didn't want to hang out with him unless Hermione was there. It wasn't as much fun as it used to be, and he started drifting off to hang out with Seamus and Dean, when he could avoid Hermione pestering him about studying. Neville was dragged by Harry along for the marathon study sessions and didn't seem to try that hard to get out of them. His loss, Ron figured. All that stress will get to a body. Ginny had taken to watching Harry and Hermione to see what was different. Harry seemed more confident, and the way that Slag seemed to always be with him wasn't very encouraging. He knew they were best friends. But with Ron drifting off and no tournament to concentrate on, she didn't like the possible implications. She'd have to talk to her mother sooner rather than later about snagging the boy who lived. Snape had been surprised to discover that Potter insisted on taking the exams for his class, though he had been offered a chance to avoid them. This Potter that emerged from the maze seemed more arrogant than the one from before the maze. But he also seemed less bothered by things. However, his work was far better than expected, and he had shown a number of instincts for potions that he hadn't noticed before. Maybe his near escape had taught him that he couldn't get by on just his fame. Severus Snape would take a wait-and-see attitude. If all else failed, there was always the red-headed idiot and the Longbottom menace to take points from. Professor McGonagall had been surprised by Harry's new academic fervor. It was rare that an average student such as he had been would make the effort for academic achievement that he had now been making. She saw how he had gravitated toward Ms. Granger rather than Mr. Weasley, and she approved. Maybe he would make something more of himself this next year. That recommendation for prefect was making more and more sense to her. Professor Dumbledore watched Harry Potter. He seemed less moody and more willing to work. Maybe getting rid of the Horcrux eye and his scar had a greater effect than he had imagined. He would have to get him trained on occlumency and inform him of the prophecy as soon as possible. Now that he didn't have to die, training would be much more imperative. Lemon drops. Always good for a good distraction. Victor had wanted to invite Hermione to Bulgaria and possibly work on making a relationship. But after they had talked and he had watched, he saw that she was drawn to Harry Potter. After the tournament, he realized that having the boy who lived as a rival really wasn't a good idea. Victor decided there were other fish in the sea. Besides, with Hermione as a friend and pen pal, if she did end up with Harry Potter, it was a good connection that could help him in the future. Fleur Delacour had left for home. She might have lost the tournament. But she had met a very interesting man in the form of Bill Weasley. She decided she would take that Gringotts internship. Luna Lovegood had been shocked. Harry Potter had found her and subscribed to the Quibbler. He and his friend Hermione had then treated her with more friendship than she had experienced in her 3 years at Hogwarts. The two Gryffindors had sat with H.R. at the Ravenclaw table, and when someone had made a comment about her and called her loony, Harry had stood up for her and called her his friend. Apparently the other Ravenclaws had believed him. Over the next days, the things that she had been missing had turned up unexpectedly, making it unnecessary to spend the final day of term looking for them. Hermione Granger had talked about theories of magic and, even if she didn't seem to believe about Nargles and Crumplehorn Snurkax, had listened to her and not made fun of her. They had made arrangements to owl each other over the summer. It was nice to have friends. Sirius had told that he had contacted Gringotts and had hired the services of the goblins to put wards over whatever locations Harry would be staying this summer. Harry remembered Grimmauld Place and hoped that there would be other options. Harry was eating lunch with Hermione and Luna when Hedwig had arrived and landed in front of Hermione. Hermione got very excited. Her parents had earlier approved a visit by a friend over for the holidays. Harry had asked if her parents would object to wards being added to their property. Apparently the answer was here. Hermione made apologies to Luna and dragged Harry off to talk about the letter. When they arrived in a deserted hallway, Hermione turned to him. "Harry, Sirius has contacted my parents and the wards have been approved. They also have invited your godfather and a guard to stay with you. Apparently Professor Dumbledore contacted them and they were told that because of your celebrity status, sometimes a guard was necessary." Harry just shook his head. Interfering old goat. Did it say who it was? Apparently, Sirius arranged with Amelia Bones to borrow the services of his cousin, or Tonks. Harry grinned. If he was going to have a guard, it might as well be one that had a sense of fun. Also, they know about your appointments on the 1st and 3rd of July. However, they're planning on a trip to Naples for 2 weeks beginning the 7th. You have been invited along. Will that be a problem? Harry shook his head. Not a problem with me. I haven't really ever gone anywhere, so a vacation sounds wonderful. Hermione started jumping up and down excitedly and then threw herself into him. Finally, a summer holiday I can enjoy, was Harry's only thought. "Hello, Harry. You gonna come over to this burrow this summer?" Ron asked at dinner Wednesday night. "I don't know, Ron. With Sirius getting guardianship from the Dursleys, I'd have to talk to him. And because of the kidnapping at the tournament, I have to have extra security this summer. Well, my mum wanted me to invite you to stay. If you don't come over, she will be disappointed. Besides, with Quidditch coming back next year, I thought I'd try out for keeper and I want to practice. I thought we could get in a few games. Plus some chess. It's been a while since we played." Harry almost groaned out loud. He'd have to ask Sirius to make excuses to the Weasleys. With Professor Dumbledore requiring where he was to be a secret, he thought it might be able to be pulled off. "Well, I'll ask Sirius and let him know. You ought to get your others and sister to help give you practice. But Ginny's a girl." Ron didn't notice the heads of every girl in listening range turned toward him with the same scowl. "But she's also a Weasley. You know. Your family has Quidditch in the blood." Ginny walked over and thanked Harry before slapping her brother in the face and walking out. It was all he could do to not laugh out loud at Ron's confused reaction. As he settled on the train with Hermione, Ron, Luna, Ginny and Neville, Harry made sure that he was next to Hermione, and when Luna sat down on his other side, he was tempted to turn and thank her. Ginny didn't look very happy that Harry was between two other girls, but she hid it well. Ron was only paying attention to the game of exploding snap that he was trying to start between everyone. As the train rushed toward London, he thought about the fact that there was one area that he had almost no experience in. He was almost sweating bullets as he contemplated how he was going to interact with Hermione's mother and father. If her mother was anything like her, that wasn't going to be a problem. No, he admitted to himself, it was totally the father that he was worried about. As Harry nervously glanced toward Hermione, he could see the small smirk she had behind the book she was reading. Hermione always could read his mind. Talking to Luna was always fun though. He got the compartment into a discussion of Crumplehorn Snurkax and where they could be found. As they got off the train, Harry saw Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. Oh, Merlin. More overbearing mothering. As the group moved toward them, Mrs. Weasley hugged each of her children as well as Hermione and Harry. "Oh, Harry. I had that Ron invited you over this summer. You must talk to Sirius about it. I will Mrs. Weasley. When I know more information, I will have Sirius or Professor Dumbledore contact you." Before the Weasleys moved off, Fred and George took Harry to the side and thanked him again for setting them up with Padfoot. "And, by next year, we will have some products for our agent, Mr. Harry Potter." Harry laughed and waved as the Weasleys moved off. Harry and Hermione turned and saw Sirius standing with an older version of Hermione. Minus the bushy hair, and a tall man who looked like he led a comfortable life. Hermione pushed her cart over and then threw herself into her father's arms before turning to her mother. Harry was amused to see the result of two competing Hermie hugs at the same time. Harry moved over himself toward the group. "Oi, pup, how was the end of term?" "Just fine, Sirius. I take it these are Hermione's parents." Hermione turned and said, "Harry, meet Mr. Robert Granger and Mrs. Emma Granger, my parents. Mum, Dad, this is my best friend, Harry Potter." Emma moved over to him and gave him a hug and said, "So this is the Harry we have heard so much about over the years." Hermione blushed at her mother's comment. Hermione's father shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, Harry." Harry looked into his eyes and could see torture under the use of dental equipment in his eyes. "Nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Granger," Harry replied nervously. "None of that now. You'll make us feel old," Mrs. Granger said. "You can call us Emma and Robert." As the group moved out of the station, Sirius said, "Well, we're going to go together in the Granger's car to their house. I was going to offer to follow them. But it's a long ride." "Follow them?" "Yes," Sirius replied. On that, he pointed over to a motorcycle sitting in the lot next to what was apparently the Granger's car, which was a nice Mercedes with plenty of room. "As it is, I'll follow till we get to a quiet area and shrink it. I promise a ride later to both you and Hermione." "How did you get the Grangers agree to that into their neighborhood?" Harry smiled. Sirius leaned over and said quietly, "I promised them each a ride sometime as well." Harry and Sirius laughed as they followed the Grangers over to the car. Y loaded the back hatch and Hermione led Harry over to the side and pulled him into the second row of seats. "Mum, Dad, why the bigger car?" "Well, honey," Mrs. Granger began, with Harry visiting as well as Sirius and his cousin. "We thought that this year's lease could be something a bit roomier. Especially as we're planning on taking more time off to spend with everyone." Hermione looked happy at that. That meant that Harry might be spending more than just 2 weeks over the summer with her, and she wouldn't miss seeing her parents as much. "I want to thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Granger, for letting me visit this year. Especially with my godfather. Really, Harry, it's not a problem. Hermione has never had a friend stay over and we're happy to have you. Besides, we have plenty of room." During the car ride to the Grangers, Hermione answered her parents' questions enthusiastically about her term and they talked about the happenings this year. Harry answered questions about the tournament. However, all throughout the ride, Harry could see the looks Mr. Granger, Robert, was giving him as Hermione seemed to drift closer and closer to his side. Finally, Emma gave her husband a fond but annoyed look and then asked, "So, is there something that you two wanted to mention?" Hermione blushed and she replied, "Well, just before the term ended, Harry and I decided to start dating." Robert most lost control of the wheel as Sirius yelled out from the rear seats, "Well done, Harry. The brightest girl in school." Harry stammered out, "Well, we've been best friends for almost 4 years, and we decided that we were interested in going out with each other." Emma hit her husband in his shoulder and then turned back towards them. "Well, I for one am very happy for you too. I'm not surprised either. Hermione's letters home have featured you prominently almost since she started." Sirius piped up from the back. His father was the same. The only girl he was ever interested was the brightest girl of her time. And Harry seems to have the same tastes. Both teens blushed as the adults in the car laughed at them. Emma was actually very happy. The only other boy her daughter mentioned regularly was Ronald Weasley. Although she liked the boy's father when he had picked Hermione up for the World Cup the year before, there were too many times that Hermione had mentioned being upset by some careless remark the red-headed teenager had made. Robert wasn't quite as happy as his wife. Even though he could see how happy Hermione was dating this bloke, the whole celebrity thing worried him. He needed a bodyguard for God's sake. However, he also seemed respectful and that was not something he had expected, well not to this degree anyway. But if he hurt his little girl, boy had a date with dentistry lined up the likes of which he had never imagined. Harry got up the next morning, happy about how the summer starts so far. Once they had arrived at Hermione's house, he had shown Harry and Sirius around the house. Tonks was there as well and was staying with Sirius in the guest house at the back of the property. It was decided with the Wards that there would be an Out time for them to get to the main house if there was an attack. Also, there was room in the guest house if Moony decided to visit. In the backyard was a pool, which caused Harry to have thoughts about Hermione and swimming attire. The main house was amazing. There were 2 stories in the house. The main floor had a kitchen, dining room, entertainment room, sitting room, bathroom and a den. The second floor had a master bedroom with a bath, 3 other bedrooms and another bath. One bedroom had been converted to a library room for Hermione when her books no longer fit in her own room. There was a plush couch and 2 plush chairs, as well as a desk for Hermione to work at. All in all, it looked like Hermione had brought elements of the Hogwarts library and Gryffindor common room home with her. They had stayed up late watching a movie in the entertainment room, Harry and Hermione, and fallen asleep against each other toward the end of the movie. Emma was smirking at them when she woke them up to go to their own rooms. Harry woke up early as he was wont to do when he was at Privet Drive. He took a quick shower and went down to the kitchen. Tonks was sitting at the table reading a copy of the Muggle Daily newspaper. Watcher. Harry. How are you doing this morning? I'm good, Tonks. So far this summer has started off brilliantly. What would you like for breakfast? Cor blimey, you cook. Tonks was amazed. Her own cooking skills were less than exciting and she ate a lot of takeout. Of course her clumsiness didn't help in the kitchen much. Sure, one thing I learned at my aunt and uncle's house was how to cook. So what do you want? How about a fry-up with eggs, bacon, scones and sausage? Alright, why don't you go and wake up Sirius, and by the time he gets over here, breakfast should almost be ready. Tonks moved to the back door to get Sirius out of the guest house, while Harry moved around the kitchen to make breakfast for everyone. Soon the smell of breakfast permeated the house, drawing the other residents down from their beds. Hermione's parents arrived first and Emma said, "Harry, you don't have to cook around here. I'm more than capable of handling meals. You're supposed to be on holiday." Harry smiled at her. "That's all right. I have a lot of practice from growing up, and I wouldn't feel right if I didn't do anything to contribute. Besides, I enjoy cooking breakfast. So if you don't mind, I'd like to cook at least sometimes, and maybe even a dinner or 2. Also, I'm a fair hand at gardening and it's nice to work outside during the summer." "Well, that's all right as long as you realize that we don't expect it," Emma replied as she walked over and gave him a hug. Hermione came down the stairs in pajamas and Emma walked over and hugged her as well and kissed her forehead. "Good morning, Mum. What smells so good?" Harry decided to cook breakfast this morning. Hermione seemed to wake up at that. "You can cook?" she asked amazed. "I'll have you know, I am an accomplished master in the kitchen. And once everyone sits down you will see what I mean," Harry said at her. Hermione laughed sheepishly as she admitted, "Well, it's one thing I can't seem to do. I've been banned from the kitchen since I tried to cook eggs and they came out green somehow." Harry smiled at her. "Oh, come on Hermione. You're good at potions. It's not like it is that different." Just then, Sirius and Tonks came in the back door. "Well, everyone, have a seat and dig in." As everyone tasted the eggs and pancakes, there were appreciative comments all around. "Blimey, Harry, this is better than my mum's," Tonks commented. As breakfast progressed, Harry brought up something. "You know I have an appointment at the bank this afternoon. I have asked Hermione and Sirius to accompany me as Sirius knows politics and banking procedures. Hermione has read far more than myself about goblin customs. The goblins are very touchy." Emma looked at him. "Well, that should be fine. What will you have planned before then?" Harry smiled sheepishly. "Well, I need to go shopping. I would like to show up at the bank looking smart, and, well, to be honest, my wardrobe has far too many hand-me-downs from my cousin." Sirius growled at mention of Harry's relatives. He settled down and said, "Well, that's a smart idea. What do you ladies think?" Emma, Hermione and Tonks looked very excited. "That sounds great. We can take you and get you fixed up nice, Mrs. Granger bubbled. Robert was looking at Harry with pity in his eyes. "Oh, to be young and naive. You do realize that shopping with 3 women isn't conducive to your health, right?" Emma hit him in the shoulder as everyone laughed. "No, that sounds good. I already asked Hermione to help me as I'm pants at fashion." Robert was secretly impressed. Usually teenage boys had their own ideas of what to wear, which was often far too flashy. It usually took years before they realized that it's better to have one's girl do the deed. Sitting as a man never wanted to upset his wife or girlfriend by being too flashy in front of other women. Well, pup, that sounds good to me. I have my debit card from Gringotts, so I'll cover the costs. The girls can cover the dressing up. And Robert can cover sitting back and laughing. Everyone around the table laughed at Harry's pouting expression. That sounds like a good plan, Emma said as she continued to laugh. By the way, Sirius, why do you call Harry, pup? Sirius asked her, do you know what an animagus is? As Emma shook her head, Hermione explained, it is a witch or wizard who can turn into an animal form. There are now 9 registered animaguses in Great Britain, including Professor McGonagall and Sirius. She didn't want to mention Wormtail. The Grangers looked interestedly at Sirius as he stood up and morphed into his Padfoot form. Emma squealed and clapped as Sirius turned back. So, as I'm a dog, and Harry's my godson, I call him, pup. That's very interesting. Is it hard? Is it related to what Tonks can do? They spent the rest of breakfast talking about animaguses and metamorph maguses, before they headed out for shopping in Gringotts. It had been a trying week for Lucius Malfoy. A week ago, his dark mark had come back to full visibility. There had been no subsequent call to his master's side. He was of two minds about that. Supporting a Dark Lord was an expensive proposition. He had joined the Death Eaters, as had other purebloods, with the idea of sweeping away the mudblood filth. He wasn't necessarily fond of the torture and the constant crucios that one had to endure as a Death Eater. But, it was far safer playing along than betraying their master. Regulus Black had found that out the hard way. Next, there was a message from his son that the new exonerated head of House Black had demanded an apology for his son's stupid baiting of Potter. With the press seriously behind Black, it was next to impossible to bribe the Daily Prophet to destroy his reputation. Their star reporter Rita Skeeter wouldn't touch it, and that made it a very difficult proposition. Blackmailing Skeeter was almost impossible, as those who had tried in the past had themselves lambasted in the press in short order. It was far too easy for Skeeter to use her secret animagus form to dig up dirt. Later in the week, Black had sent a message that his will contain clauses to dissolve his marriage and disown his wife and son should Sirius or the Potter brat meet an unnatural demise. He couldn't afford to get into a blood feud with House Black. It was one of few names old and prestigious enough that public disapproval from the house would affect his position adversely. The only thing that would be worse was when the half-blood Potter declared his status as head of house. The Potter name was even older than the Black name. And half-blood or not, Harry Potter had sufficient political clout as the boy who lived that combining it with head of House Potter would be very problematic. He had been eroding the boy's reputation for the last several years, but Sirius Black being found innocent threw a wrench into his whole plan. Damn Fudge for being an incompetent. To top it all off, his wife had been strangely non-cooperative. Although she was a firm proponent of the superiority of purebloods, she was not the zealot that her sister Bellatrix Lestrange was. Narcissa had been sympathetic toward her favorite sister Andromeda when the latter had been disowned, privately of course. Now that her sister had been reinstated by Black, Narcissa had been interested in reaching out to her. As much as she loved him and his son, he knew that the bonds of sisterhood were strong enough that if he pushed too hard, she would ask Black for a divorce. And blood traitor that he was, he would grant it. It was time to educate his son on the new realities for House Malfoy. Cornelius Fudge hadn't been enjoying his week any more than Lucius Malfoy. With the revelations of the past week, he had lost serious political clout. There were rumors of a vote of no confidence, and he didn't have an easy plan to overcome it. If he tried to push for support from Harry Potter, his godfather would interfere and there was no love lost for Fudge from Sirius Black. He had been barely successful in keeping the news of Lord Thingy's return a secret. If that got out, he could kiss his political career goodbye. He had been forced to increase the funding for the Aurors, and that bit into the programs that he had set up to keep the purebloods happy. Add that to the G600,000 that the ministry had to fork out to Black to make up for 12 years of illegal incarceration. The ministry's finances were not in a position to start any bold new initiatives to increase his popularity. And he couldn't even use the real guilty party, Barty Crouch Sr., as a scapegoat, 'cause he was dead. And guilty or not, the public liked a live target. This was not a good week. Amelia Bones had been working hard since the tournament. After the incident with Sirius Black and his exoneration, she had been worried that her department would be destroyed from the political fallout. It wasn't her main concern, of course. First and foremost, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement was about justice. However, for some unknown reason, the Daily Prophet and Rita Skeeter seemed to be going out of their way to be fair to her in her current department. It was very strange. Normally, with blood in the water, the press was there like hungry sharks ready to destroy reputations. But Rita Skeeter had taken the unprecedented step of consulting her as to what she could print regarding the night of the Triwizard Tournament. She had refused to cite her source, but had apparently had very accurate information. And except the bit about Voldemort and his resurrection being left out for security reasons, damn fudge, she couldn't even deny any of it as it was the truth, and much, if not all, of it was or would become part of the public record. Still, she had forced through increased funding for her department and had also initiated investigations into corruption in the minister's office. Too many mistakes were being made. And she didn't like mistakes. Dolores Umbridge was in a quandary. Although she normally defended Cornelius with everything she had, she didn't know if this was the right thing to do currently. Her political power was tied to his, but his seemed to be crumbling fast. And if she stayed tied to a sinking ship, she might drown. She was still working on limiting and destroying half-human and non-human freaks such as the centaurs, werewolves, goblins, giants and merpeople. She had gotten the laws limiting werewolves passed and through Slytherin Cunning had been working on increasing the power of the ministry over such things. She had gotten the statuary in the ministry atrium altered, and wizards were coming to see the inferiority of that filth more and more. However, the public was currently far too sympathetic to Harry Potter, and he was a known supporter of non-humans. Apparently he was friends with a free house elf. That was an abomination. And the Daily Prophet had gone inexplicably sympathetic to the boy who lived. Plans would have to be made. Lord Voldemort was having a bad week of his own. Ever since that filthy rat had botched the resurrection ritual, he had been forced to hide from the glory that he had been planning. Although he was in a new body, it was deformed. He had protuberances in his mouth which prevented him from speaking Parseltongue. Because Wormtail had contaminated the ritual with what was apparently spider blood, it was even worse. Snakes and spiders didn't get along, especially magical snakes and magical spiders. So even ching a snake to put it somewhere where it could be used to create another small body for a corrected ritual was difficult. Damn Potter for destroying his snake. Add to that his wand had been taken and he had no spare. He was currently limited to his admittedly good wandless ability to even feed and take care of himself. He couldn't call his followers because first of all, he needed someone with the dark mark to call his other followers, and even if he had one to hand, his current form was not one to inspire fear and compliance. Instead it would inspire disgust and revulsion. He might to start all over again with somehow losing this body. Luckily his Horcruxes were still safe, or otherwise he wouldn't survive losing a body a second time. He had checked the closest one, Gaunt's ring, before moving off to more hidden locations, so he knew that at least one Horcrux still anchored him. Some drastic measures might need to be taken. Neville Longbottom was happy. In the last week of term, Harry Potter and Hermione Granger had taken him under their wing and helped him prepare for his exams. Harry had even asked him, Neville Longbottom, for help with herbology. His grandmother had been impressed with his improved scores. As a result of discussions he had had with Harry, he had convinced her to take him to get a new wand. He hadn't realized that a wand had to choose a wizard. He had successfully convinced his grandmother to consult with Ollivander, and if he agreed, Neville was getting new wand. Maybe he wasn't so pants at magic as he thought. The fact that he had been using a wand that might not be suited for him meant that the fact that he could do magic at all was a very good sign. Things were definitely looking up. Augusta Longbottom was impressed. Her grandson, no matter how much she loved him, had always been a little bit of a disappointment. She had used all of her formidable personality to try to mold him into the figure she knew he was capable of, but until now she had had little hope. He had come back from Hogwarts, however, much different. He had apparently befriended the boy who lived and his best friend, who according to rumors was the brightest witch of this age. He had improved his grades and was walking with a new confidence. He had talked to her about getting a new wand. Her arguments about being good enough for him if it was good enough or her Frank had been countered very effectively. She had agreed to take him to Ollivander's and consult the wandmaker. Her grandson had also been convinced to work hard to lose the baby fat he still carried. He had convinced her to hire tutors to train him in sword fighting, a noble skill for a pureblood of a noble and ancient house. She would have to do something to strengthen the ties with her son and Harry Potter. Such improvement should be encouraged, and House Longbottom just might have a scion to be proud of. Molly Weasley was not quite as impressed. Her daughter had come to her for advice in snaring Harry Potter. Molly had regaled her in the tales from her own time at Hogwarts. She had convinced Ginny that getting Harry to see her as a girl could be accomplished by dating other boys first. She had also told Ginny about how she had used some mild love potions to get Arthur to notice her. She hoped that her daughter had gotten the idea. Maybe it wasn't a bad thing that Harry hadn't been set to come to the Burrow this summer. It would give her Ginny time to get ready to put her plans in place. Her twins, Fred and George, had come back from school with gleams in their eyes that frankly worried her. They had mentioned becoming unofficial apprentices of a master of some type. An apprenticeship sounded respectable, but she couldn't get any more details than that from them, citing secrecy agreements. She just hoped that whatever they were working on would help them get respectable jobs at the ministry. Her son Ronald, however, was proving to be a disappointment. His only interest seemed to be chess, food and Quidditch. His grades continued to be mediocre, and the only reason they were that good was by the force of his friend, that muggle-born Hermione Granger. That was a thought. Maybe she should tell the girl's parents to invite her over. The girl could spend time with both of her children, Ginny to work on becoming more socially involved with Harry's friends, and Ronald to maybe get him a wife that could keep him in line. Little did she know how disappointed she would be by the end of summer. Luna Lovegood was dreamily remembering the end of term. In a space of a week, she had gone from friendless and bullied loony to a girl with friends that protected her from anyone wanting to harm her. Hermione was fun to talk to about magic in their classes. It wasn't as much fun as the creatures she was interested in. Luna wasn't in Ravenclaw for nothing. Harry, however, was more than willing to talk about Nargles, Waxperts, Snurkax and Heliotropes. He also was very protective and had almost single-handedly made her time at Hogwarts fun. Luna remembered the creatures that had shown up when Hermione and Harry were together, and she realized that they were in for an interesting future. Neville was almost as shy as she herself was, but also never insulted her. He had stopped shying away when people made comments about him hanging out with her, and in fact had responded in such a way that people stopped making the comments. It was so very nice having friends. Larry and Bob were having a beer together. After one of their more important clients at Afterlife, Inc. had made a nuisance of himself, he had been sent back and seemed to be making a good go of it. They had laughed over the new details that had shown up in the files about one Tom Marvolo riddle. If all went to plan, Harry Potter would get the goblins on board, a notoriously tricky endeavor. That could only bode well for keeping him from another premature visit to the office. Bob was quite proud of the guidance he had given to Harry Potter, very sneaky and, with a little bit of luck, very effective. He could give some more suggestions through Larry. It was always good tea. Have a pet project to keep you interested. Larry was almost looking forward to visiting his client for the next review interview stated in the contract. If all went well, he could avoid a drafty barge on an ugly river. Harry Potter walked out of Harrods convinced that shopping was the root of all evil. Hermione, Emma and Tonks were all very happy to play with their new Harry doll. Harry had to admit it, the results were good. But at the same time he was very happy that an appointment at Gringotts precluded the all-day shopping trip that the women seemed perfectly willing to have. He, unfortunately, had fallen into a trap due to his inexperience with the female mindset. When Emma had mentioned it being disappointing that they couldn't get all of the shopping done for their planned trip, he had, in his polite manner, agreed that it was too bad, secretly thanking Merlin that time was limited. Somehow, however, that had translated to the women that a later all-day shopping trip would have to be planned. Robert had stuck by his role as the peanut gallery admirably. He had laughed, out of the hearing of his wife and daughter of course, at the way Harry was marched in and out of the changing rooms as Emma. Hermione and Tonks had systematically moved around the store checking into clothes of all types for all occasions. Sirius, the moneybags for this trip to Women's Paradise, actually looked tired himself. He had offered to kit out Tonks, as a thank you for her going out of her way on the protection duty, and to buy something for Emma and Robert as a thank you for inviting them over. They had objected, but Sirius had stood firm. Harry had actually left the store in a suit. Although he wanted to dress casually, he felt that all efforts should be made to be as formal as possible. They would still have to stop at Madame Malkin's before the bank, but Harry hoped the shopping frenzy was over for the day. Harry, Sirius and Hermione walked into the front door of Gringotts at 1:45. The Grangers were bringing the results of the shopping back to the house with Tonks. Sirius would send a Patronus message, a spell that was a specialty of the Order of the Phoenix, to Tonks when they were finished so that she could return and side along one of the teens when they were finished. Harry spied Griphook as one of the tellers. Admittedly, in the last timeline Griphook had reneged the deal regarding the Sword of Gryffindor. He had still aided them sufficiently so that they could obtain the cup and, in the end, it didn't really matter as sword apparently could be called regardless. Well, better the devil you know. Harry waited for Griphook to finish his current customer before walking over to him with Sirius and Hermione following. Greetings, Teller Griphook. How are you today? Griphook looked up at the wizard who had addressed him so politely, for a wizard anyway. I am well. May I help you? Griphook was shocked. It was rare indeed for a wizard to recognize a goblin by name. And it was almost as rare for a wizard to inquire as to the health of a goblin. Griphook, of course, was unaware that Harry had recently seen him in another timeline. I have an appointment at 2 o'clock today and would like to inform Gringotts' representative that I have arrived and am available at their pleasure. Other goblins had started to notice. All could see that the wizard in front of Griphook was respectful. And those within earshot, a great many due to their superb hearing, could see that the wizard had arrived early for an appointment and had offered to wait until the goblin was ready, instead of demanding immediate service. A very noteworthy occurrence. Griphook took them down a hallway that seemed low and wide. Such tunnels were built for goblins. They ended in front of two massive doors guarded by 8 spear-wielding goblins. Griphook bade them to wait a number of feet from the door and approached. He bowed to the two directly in front of the door and spoke. Mr. Harry James Potter has arrived for his 2 o'clock appointment early and would inform Director Ragnarok that he is available at his pleasure. The guards noted that the wizards and witch stood patiently with no indication that they were impatient should any wait be necessary. The captain of the Goblin Guard nodded to Griphook and entered the office to inform Ragnarok that his appointment had arrived. In a few short minutes, the captain opened the doors fully, said a word to the other guards in gobbledygook, and 2 of the guards moved inside while the captain and another goblin stood in profile next to the 2 doors. Griphook turned and motioned the party to move forward and into the office. As Harry approached the door, he could see that Griphook was preparing to leave. Harry bowed to him and said, My thanks, Teller Griphook. May your gold flow and your enemies be crushed. He then stood and moved into the office, not noticing the surprised looks on Hermione's and Sirius's face or the shocked reactions of the guards, which were quickly suppressed. As Harry moved in, he stood in front of a massive desk with a very old-looking goblin that nevertheless sat with the confidence of a warrior. Harry bowed to the goblin, with Sirius and Hermione quickly following suit. Greetings, Director Ragnarok. As requested by a representative of Gringotts, I have arrived for consultation, Harry said as he completed his bow. Ragnarok replied, Gringotts welcomes you, Mr. Potter. Your advisors and yourself may have a seat. Harry sat as he noted that the captain of the guard and the other goblin who had stood opposite to him moved to the wall behind Ragnarok. A quick glance showed that the 2 goblins that had entered previously had moved to the back of the room next to the doors and stood at attention. Gringotts has requested this meeting to ascertain some information that may affect you as a client of our bank. I, as Gringotts' representative, offer oath that the information requested will in no way be used against you. May I proceed? Quote. Harry replied with a closed smile, not good to show your teeth to a goblin. No oath is necessary. As Gringotts holds my assets in trust arranged by my ancestors. My own trust is granted and your statement as to intentions is sufficient. Hermione sat back listening to this and wondered where the hell Harry had learned goblin customs. She knew he did not pay attention in history of magic and often slept through it. The importance of custom to goblins was a prime point in the constant retelling of goblin rebellions in that class. She had looked up goblin customs in her research and certain things had only been implied, as though the reader should know already many things. Even she could not have directed him to do this well. Sirius sat back with approval. At no time did Harry disrespect the goblin, and Sirius knew, from experience both from when he was younger with his family and recent trips to the bank, that disrespect led to difficult times. At Gringotts, and respect led to a much more pleasant experience. Ragnar sat and looked at this scion of an ancient and most noble wizarding house. Although the more moderate, pureblood families treated the goblins with respect, it was rare that even they refused an oath when offered. Such oaths were required to be offered by treaty after unfortunate results in past wars. To a goblin, an offered oath was sufficient to hold him to his honor. Wizards demanded that such things be enforced by magic. This enforced compliance implied honor was not sufficient. No greater insult could be given a goblin than to be called oath-breaker. The attitudes of wizards had created much resentment in the goblin race. Wizards did not hold such unmagically enforced oaths. This created a view that wizards were not honorable. And this view had been reinforced by past dealings with the wizard race. As a result of this, dishonor to a wizard when possible was not the automatic death that it used to be. It was a vicious cycle. Ragnar would have to encourage his guards to relay this to others. Harry Potter had acted with the honor of a goblin, and as a result, dishonor to Mr. Potter would be a death sentence. Harry was thankful to Bob at this point. Bob, or Robert as he used to be called, he had mentioned, had made a number of suggestions to Harry about informing the goblins about certain things. He hadn't explained all of the reasons. But the grin that he had been sporting had implied that he should sit back and watch the show. He had encouraged Harry to refuse oaths and how to go about that, and had said it was very important. He didn't understand it all, but Harry had listened raptly and had followed Bob's instructions. From the look of things, so far, so good. Well, then, Mr. Potter, to the heart of the matter. As director of Gringotts and leader of the Goblin Nation, I request information as to your dealings with the creature known as Lord Voldemort and his followers. This information will be used to ascertain any recompense that would be due to you and your estate, as well as to help me to guide Gringotts polices as regards certain wizarding factions. Harry was prepared for this. If I might make a request, I offer copies of all my memories for your review. Due to the extensive nature of my dealings with him and certain followers, it would be faster if you reviewed them and then I would answer any questions. May I have a moment to consult my advisors? Ragnar nodded and cast a privacy charm which would allow Harry to talk to Sirius and Hermione without being heard. Sirius, seems they are pretty interested in Voldemort and his Death Eaters. Can I offer him your memories of Wormtail becoming my parents' secret keeper, the night my parents were killed, what happened when you saw Wormtail in the paper and escaped, as well as the night we helped you escape after being caught at Hogwarts, starting with the going into the Shrieking Shack. Sure, pup. I might also suggest the incident from the Great Hall. Lucius Malfoy and my meeting with his wife that I had as a result. Harry nodded. He turned to Hermione. Can you include memories of when you found the information on basilisks? When you got petrified and any threats you might have heard about me from Draco Malfoy? Hermione nodded. As the request was about the effects on you, and Draco's father was a follower in the last war. That might be a good idea. Harry turned back toward Ragnar and nodded to him. Ragnar cancelled the charm. I have asked my advisors to offer memories as regards their own dealings Voldemort and his followers as regards me as well. Would you like their memories included? That would be acceptable. You may draw your wands to retrieve the memories. Drawing wands was strictly prohibited in Gringotts without express permission. Ragnar nodded to the captain of the guard and he moved to a cabinet and moved 3 pensives to the desk one at a time and placed them in front of each of them. Sirius explained to Hermione how to retrieve a memory and the 3 of them started putting memories into the pensives. Sirius had only the 4. Hermione included a couple more than that. Harry, however, included many more. He started with the memory of the night he was hit with the killing curse. He then included the incident with the trap door, the night he slew the Basilisk Inc. Ludding freeing Dobby and Lucius attempting the Avada Kedavra curse before Dobby knocked him back, the Shrieking Shack, the World Cup, the casting of the Imperious Curse during the 4th year defense against the Dark Arts class. The pulling of his name from the Goblet of Fire, the memory of the conversation between Snape and Karkaroff as well as all 3 of the tasks and the aftermath of the 3rd one. All in all, the pensieve was getting quite full. Once he was done, Ragnarok looked at Harry's pensieve for a moment before looking at him. Mr. Potter, would it be inconvenient if you returned in 2 hours so as to give us time to review the memories? I offer oath to return the memories without alteration. Once again, your stated intention is enough for me. Sirius, Hermione. Sirius and Hermione followed Harry's example and the goblin was even more impressed. We will return at 5 o'clock. As Harry stood, he offered a farewell as he bowed to the old goblin. May your gold overflow and your enemies be crushed. Sirius and Hermione followed his example once again and one of the guards escorted them to the lobby. Well, we have some time to kill. How would my girlfriend like a trip to Flourish and Bots, my treat? Hermione squealed and dragged Harry and Sirius off to the bookstore. In the end, Sirius had to cover the costs until Harry could pay him back from the Triwizard winnings he had at the Granger home. Harry had insisted. Clothes and food and summer holiday costs might fall under the purview of a guardian, but treats for his girlfriend definitely fell under the responsibility of a boyfriend. The argument had to be had away from the prying ear of Hermione who had been distracted by a trip to her favorite playground. Harry had also found a book on occlumency. He knew he was shite at it. He had avoided looking Snape in the eye and Dumbledore could be a problem as well. He decided he didn't want to take the chance. After a promise to return at a later date, Harry finally got Hermione out of the store for a trip for some ice cream before their return to the bank. Upon entering the doors to Gringotts, Harry noticed that there were very few other customers. Saturday afternoon apparently was a quiet time at the bank. Griphook approached and bowed to them while inviting them to follow him once again. Harry, with Sirius and Hermione following suit once again, bowed back and agreed. They made their way to Ragnarok's office. The remaining guards saluted them by holding their non-spear hand to their chest and nodding their heads, as the captain and the 3 other, inside GUARDS, followed the procedure from earlier. Not knowing what else to do, Harry put his hand to his chest and nodded his head at the salute as before they passed through the doors. As they entered, Ragnarok himself saluted them in a similar fashion and Harry returned it as the others bowed. Ragnarok started off the conversation. Mr. Potter, Gringotts thanks you for the opportunity to view your memories of your battles with Lord Voldemort. The information was quite valuable to us. We of the Goblin Nation recognize you as a warrior due a warrior's courtesies. Sirius and Hermione were a bit gobsmacked. Harry was surprised himself. He hadn't expected that really. There are a fair few questions we have of you. Harry agreed to answer them and Ragnarok continued. In one of your memories, you fought this wizard for a Philosopher's Stone. How did that come about? Harry explained in brief detail, inviting Hermione to add information as to the research, which was her area of expertise. Ragnarok sat up in his chair at one point. Who knew that this creature had been behind the break-in at our bank and why were we not informed? Harry thought about it. Until the confrontation, we could not be certain who it was. Afterward, ourselves, Professor Dumbledore and Professor Severus Snape could have made the connection. I would have thought that Professor Dumbledore would have informed you as we were in no position to do so until much later. Ragnarok looked thoughtful. What was the final dispensation with the carcass of Slytherin's beast? Harry looked at the goblin. It is, at this moment, still lying in the Chamber of Secrets. The only person who can enter the chamber besides myself is Tom Riddle, also known as Voldemort, and I have no authority over the grounds. Ragnarok shook his head. According to law and custom, the slayer of a magical beast, unless killed in a reservation or a place where they are bred, is awarded its carcass or any proceeds from it. It is quite valuable as the parts of a basilisk are quite rare. At this point, a certain tenseness entered Ragnarok. Where is the sword that you used to slay the beast? Harry knew about the goblin's interest in goblin-made items. They considered that they were owned by the maker and his descendants and only rented for the life of the wizard who contracted them. Harry didn't know that one of Ragnarok's own ancestors had been the forger of the sword. Harry was aware that this tied into the reason goblins no longer sold items to wizards. the concession allowing wizard families to retain already purchased items in a treaty. After one of the Goblin-Wizard Wars still rankled within the Goblin Nation. As a rule though, possessors of such items, usually old pureblood families, were treated with an increased amount of indifference to their needs and a bit of harshness when goblins could get away with it. It sits in a display case in the office of the headmaster of Hogwarts. As the sword of Godric Gryffindor, it is quite valuable to the school. According to Professor Dumbledore, it may be called at need by any Gryffindor. Ragnarok, knowing the wizard did not hold on to the goblin-made item himself, left that for another time. Albus Dumbledore would know the displeasure of the Goblin Nation. We have one other question that we must ask. Do you know the method by which one Tom Marvolo Riddle possessed the girl in the chamber with a diary? Harry nodded his head. He asked for a pen and a small piece of parchment. Bob had told him that he should not say this word out loud to the goblins. He didn't understand it, but he would follow his advice. He wrote one word on the parchment and passed it back to Ragnarok. Ragnarok's face became harsh. He stood up before them and said, "Mr. Potter, this may not be discussed here. Would you come alone to my private office? Mr. Black, I offer oath that your charge nor yourselves will be harmed." Sirius looked shocked at the change in demeanor of the chief of the Goblin Nation. Once again, your stated intention is sufficient. Hermione looked worried as well. When goblins were upset, it wasn't a good thing for those that upset them. With the offer of an oath, she wasn't as worried as she would have been. But something was going on, and she wanted to find out what it was. Ragnarok, the captain of his guard, and Harry moved off to a door along the side of the main office. Ragnarok passed through the door with Harry following. The captain closed the door and stood guard in front of it. Inside, the office, unlike the main office, was much smaller and had solid stone for walls. The door was even stone. The furniture was much more simple, with the desk apparently made of solid, black stone which Harry did not recognize as onyx. There were no chairs but stone stools on both sides of it. The shelves, also made of stone, held many items of considerable beauty, and along the area behind the desk, some very old tomes. Ragnarok sat down on his own stool and pointed toward the other one. After Harry sat down, Ragnarok looked at him and asked, "What do you know of this vile piece of evil magic that you wrote here?" And Ragnarok pointed at the parchment in front of him with one word written on it, Horcrux. Ragnarok looked at Harry expectantly. Harry had never seen such an intense interest in what a wizard had to say by a goblin. "Can I ask that this information stay between Gringotts and myself?" Ragnarok answered him, "Since this piece of magic was used against us 2,000 years ago, there has been an interdiction by the chiefs of the Goblin Nation against this Nation's creation becoming known by wizards and other magical creatures. We have, at every opportunity, destroyed any references to the creation methods of such a vile piece of magic whenever we had opportunity. Information on their destruction is allowed to our warriors, curse breakers, and other wizards that we have decided were worthy of the information and that could aid in the destruction of such. A clause has been built into every treaty we have ever had that allows us to destroy any enemy of the Goblin Nation that used this, the blackest magic that we have encountered. Any magical creature that brings the use of it to our attention is owed Wergild, as long as they themselves have not used this magic. This Wergild is paid from the assets and chattel of the enemy that we destroy. Hold any creature knowingly hide or pass along such hideous devices, we shall use whatever methods available to destroy them financially, unless they themselves were the creator, whereupon their total destruction is required. So Mr. Potter, I can assure you, no information of this shall be passed beyond the walls of Gringotts to any magical or mundane being." Wow, Harry thought. Bob had been too. Tally right about sitting back and watching the show. I have become aware that Tom Marvolo Riddle, descendant of Salazar Slytherin, created 7 of these devices. 6 of them were created intentionally and 1 was unintentional. Ragnarok looked interested in this last bit. "The scar upon my forehead, received when the killing curse rebounded from me based on the rites of protection and sacrifice that my mother endured, became his 6th Horcrux. Through pain and sacrifice, I have seen this destroyed. The diary I destroyed with a basilisk fang after my defeat of Slytherin's beast was the first that Riddle created." Ragnarok looked at Harry with awe. The destruction of a Horcrux from a living being without the loss of the life of that being had never been accomplished. Usually such a thing overcame the being and they could be easily possessed by the creator of the Horcrux. This had happened to a goblin chief and was the reason that they so hated this magic. Harry decided to just tell the goblins up front where they all were. By various means, I have found that the items are as follows. The Diary of Tom Marvolo Riddle was created first and was placed in the hands of Lucius Malfoy for safekeeping. The death of the girl who is now a ghost at Hogwarts known as Moaning Myrtle was used in the creation of this device. Lucius, in an effort to destroy a political rival, passed it on to the daughter of Arthur Weasley. I do not believe Lucius Malfoy, nor any other follower, was aware of the exact nature of the device. By possessing her, the beast of Slytherin was loosed on the castle, requiring me to destroy the beast and the diary. The Gaunt family ring, located under the floorboards in the shack formerly owned by Marvolo Gaunt, was the second created. Riddle killed his biological father and his father's family when he obtained this to create the device and framed his mother's brother for their deaths. He died in Azkaban. The locket of Salazar Slytherin was created third or fourth, I believe. This was obtained by Riddle from Hepzibah Smith by murder. Miss Smith obtained it from the shop owned by Caractacus Burke, which he worked for after he left Hogwarts. This locket was sold by Lee's mother to Burke before she died in childbirth. Regulus Arcturus Black, a follower of Lord Voldemort, found out that he had created a device and where it had been hidden. He recanted his associatee on and sacrificed himself to obtain it back and ordered his house elf, Creature, to ensure its destruction. Unfortunately, the means of its destruction are beyond a house elf and remains in the Black family home at this time. I do not know of the death associated with the creation of this device. Inform the house elf that you are destroying it please and that this is on the wish of his master Sirius Black. It will help in the long run. The diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw, located in the Room of Requirement at Hogwarts Castle was possibly the last created intentionally before his body was destroyed. The ghost of Helena Ravenclaw was manipulated by Tom Riddle to revealing the location of diadem. He then placed it, after he turned it into a device, in the Room of Requirement when he came to the castle under the guise of requesting a job. I also do not know of the death used for the creation of this device. The snake Nagini. This was a snake that became Riddle's familiar and was used in rituals to maintain the form he used before he was resurrected by the ritual performed by Peter Pettigrew at the end of the third task of the Triwizard Tournament. I believe the death of Bertha Jorkins was used in the creation of this device. As you may have seen in the memory provided, I have killed this snake and destroyed the device. Harry, in fact, did not know whether it had already been a Horcrux. It had been suggested by Bob, but not explicitly stated. However, the nightmare he had where he saw the scene of Barty Crouch Jr.'s return to Voldemort from the snake's viewpoint implied it as well. Myself, I have already told you of its destruction. However, while the device was destroyed, I still maintain a small emotional link with Voldemort which will apparently only end when he is finally killed. This is one way of which I have obtained information as regards the location of the devices. Other information as to how I obtained this information must, by holy contract, be kept by myself and only Ms. Granger may be informed. In time, I may tell her. But I offer oath that the information I have as to the creation of such devices will not be divulged, nor will I divulge the small amount of information that I do have as to their creation methods, which does not include the exact method. The last, which you may be most interested in. Hufflepuff's goblet. This was also obtained from Miss Smith. She, as a distant descendant of Helena Hufflepuff, held this as a family treasure. Miss Smith was killed 2 days after Riddle learned of her possession of the items. Her house elf was convicted of killing her by poison. This cup was placed in the care of one of his top lieutenants, Bellatrix Lestrange, to be placed in her vault at Gringotts. As far as I know, it is there at this very moment. Ragnarok looked at the wizard in front of him. Never, in the 2,000 years since the interdiction had been placed, had a wizard created so many of these vile devices. And never in the 2,000 years had one wizard, or any magical creature, been so helpful in their destruction or personally destroyed so many. According to the wizard's story, he had destroyed 3 of them already, and given the goblins all of the information needed to destroy the other 4. Goblin curse breakers with the aid of others willing could remove the evil taint from items. According to their customs, the finder of Horcruxes Should they desire it, were given the items as part of the payment for alerting the goblins as to their location. The Goblin Nation owed significant wergild to the young warrior in front of him. Mr. Potter, as payment for the information you have provided, the Goblin Nation offers any recompense that you desire. We will provide services to you in the House of Potter at no charge in perpetuity. The items, once obtained, will be cleansed of their evil taint and given to you as part of the recompense. What boons do you request of the Goblin Nation? Harry thought about how he could use this information most effectively. In exchange for the wergild owed, I ask for one goblin-made item to be held in perpetuity, the Sword of Gryffindor. It is to be held by either his heir, or the head of Gryffindor House of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry should there be no current heir, to be used in defense of the school as needed. Ragnarok, the descendant of the maker of sword, would and could provide this gladly. The wizard apparently, by his very wording, did not know that he himself was an heir. The other heir was scion of the ancient and noble House of Longbottom. Both the Potters and the Longbottoms had married into the Gryffindor line and been cadet branches. I also ask that the diadem of Ravenclaw be returned to the heir of Ravenclaw, or should there be no heir, to the head of Ravenclaw House to be used to guide students to wisdom. The locket of Salazar Slytherin should be given to the head of Slytherin House as a keepsake of their founder. I know there is no other heir than Tom Marvolo Riddle and a death sentence hangs over him as a creator of these devices. Ragnarok could argue against that. As this wizard had defeated Riddle 3 times, he could claim rights as Slytherin's heir. I also request Hufflepuff's chalice to be given to the head of Hufflepuff House to be held for use to aid in healing at the school. Apparently, according to my sources, Harry thought healing potions delivered by this cup are increased in efficiency and may mean the difference between life and death. Gaunt's ring is a special case. I must ask this as a boon of the Goblin Nation. This item is magical device of great power with great chance of a corruption of its use. The stone on this ring has another name, the Resurrection Stone. Along with the wand held by Albus Dumbledore and the invisibility cloak passed down in my family, it is a part of the items known as the Deathly Hallows and are the basis for the story of the 3 brothers in the Tales of Beetle the Bard. Ragnarok was floored. These items collected together were a source of great power for the wizard who held them. They were wizard's magic and could not, outside of the cloak, be used by non-humans, and no wizard had ever revealed their location to a goblin. I ask that the ring be held by the Goblin Nation, away from the use of any wizard, in perpetuity. They may only be eased by oaths of secrecy and returned by my descendants, and only it needs sufficient to convince the chief of the Goblin Nation. I should tell you at this time. There is a prophecy in the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry of Magic. According to my sources, this prophecy was given to Albus Dumbledore and had something to do with the reason he attacked me as a baby. Should it be appropriate, I offer alliance to the Goblin Nation for his destruction. I also ask for future alliance with my intended, Ms. Granger, in her quest for equal rights for all magical people and creatures. My intended, although she does not know she is my intended yet, has a thing about rights for non-pureblood witches and wizards and other magical creatures such as house elves. As she is the brightest person I know, I intend to spend my life helping her in her quest because she can only succeed when she puts her mind to something. Ragnarok vastly appreciated the wizard Harry Potter. In the guise of boons from the Goblin Nation, he had offered hope for the first time in many years to tear down the discrimination of the wizarding world against goblins and other non-humans, as well as the bigotry of the pure-blooded factions. He had asked for very little for himself personally and had apparently thought of only the future of which Ragnarok could wholeheartedly approve. Never in the history of goblin-wizard relations had one wizard aided the goblins so much with no thought using the goblins for their own power. Usually alliances were requested by wizards to aid them to rule over others. Goblins rejected such things, because they had no desire for tyrants. They only asked for the right to maintain their traditions and their own sovereignty. I will agree in principle. If your intended is such a one as yourself, the resources of the Goblin Nation shall be used toward such a goal. Is there anything else you ask of us? Harry thought about it. May I consult my advisors? I will not reveal to them any information as to the devices. But I need to ask them about some plans I have. Ragnarok agreed and led Harry back to the outer office. Harry saw that Hermione and Sirius were relieved to see a smile on Harry's face after his meeting. That meant there wasn't trouble. Trouble with goblins was bad business. Director Ragnarok, can you cast the privacy charm again? Okay, Sirius, how dark is the Black family anyway? Harry asked this knowing full well the answer. Well, pup, until me, the family has been pure-blooded bigots with little regard for niceties for many generations. Why do you ask? In a minute. How would you like to get rid of all the dark items of your family? Sirius whistled. How do you plan on doing that? If you are willing to give up any goblin-made artifacts from your vaults or property. I think I can convince the goblins to do it at no additional charge. What do you think? Sirius shrugged. He didn't need all that crap. It's all right by me. Getting rid of all of it will be a burden off me. I was thinking about where we could live, but all the Black properties would be too hard to clean up fast enough. A Potter property might work, but as it's been years since any were inhabited. Clean up for those might have been problematic as well. Well, as we were planning on going on vacation with Hermione's family, maybe we could arrange for the goblins to work on those. As my guardian, I would need your permission to offer the return of any goblin-made artifacts from my properties and, even though the family wasn't apparently dark, you never know what skeletons in the closet might be there. I can agree to that. Hermione, I have a question for you. What plans do you have after Hogwarts? To Hermione, this was out of left field. Well, I was thinking of going to a university afterward. I was thinking about getting into law. A lot of things about the magical world are backwards and I want to try to move it forward to at least the 20th century. Beyond that, here Hermione blushed. I've thought about a family as well. Harry grinned at her. Well, if I might be included in that plan, I think I like that. Hermione blushed more as she hugged Harry hard. Quote, would you like a scholarship to a university? Some things that came up with Ragnarok might afford you one. Hermione looked excited. This was a dream come true. The only thing that had worried her about her future plans was how to get into a university without attending regular schools. It was difficult to get into the best schools after Hogwarts. There was a program for those that wanted to continue their non-magical educations. But it often only covered the least expensive schools. Purebloods, while wanting to encourage Muggleborns to leave the wizarding world, did not want the Ministry spending gold to put them in the best schools. It was one of the things that she wanted to change. She thought that Muggleborns shouldn't lose the opportunity for scholarships that happened when they attended magical schools. Her parents would have helped of course, but even well-off families such as her own didn't have an easy time of covering such a vast expense. Harry turned and nodded at Ragnarok once again. After he cancelled the privacy spell, he began his pitch. After consulting my advisors and guardians, I would ask the following. In exchange for the destruction of dark items at any House of Black family properties and vaults. Here Harry gave Ragnarok a somewhat significant look that Sirius and Hermione missed as they were looking at Ragnarok. The House of Black will offer the return of N.Y. goblin-made items that may be found at such properties or vaults. This request includes aid in the renovations to make the properties habitable or able to be sold. Is that acceptable? Ragnarok caught on quickly. This would give them opportunity to get the Horcrux from the Black family home. The return of any goblin-made artifacts was an additional bonus. The Goblin Nation accepts. As consideration for the courtesy shown, proceeds from any item that have their curses removed will be deposited to the Black family vault. Is that acceptable? Sirius replied with surprise. This was much more than they had asked for. That would be more than acceptable. Architects and construction bosses under our employ will wish to contact you this week as to your wishes for the properties in question. As an added note, I need to inform you of the following. According to information we have recently received, your brother, one Regulus Arcturus Black, was killed when renouncing his master, Voldemort, and opposing him in a significant way. In doing so, he inadvertently aided the Goblin Nation. The offer made in the proceeds is in recognition of this fact. Tears fell down Sirius's cheeks. His brother had not died as a Death Eater but had died opposing Voldemort. He had thought he had failed his brother, only to find out that his brother was truly on the side of the light when he died. After giving Sirius a moment to compose himself, Harry continued, I would make the same request for any Potter properties. As to my properties, my guardian has agreed with me and I offer the return of any goblin-made artifacts held by the Potter family to be returned in exchange for the removal of any dark items and the renovation of any properties to make them habitable. This is not as urgent as the Black P. Properties, as I am the ward of Sirius Black and will not need to inhabit these properties in the near future. Ragnarok could see that this wizard was going out of his way to offer courtesy to the Goblin Nation. That will be agreeable. When would you like to meet with the architects and construction bosses? Harry thought about it. May I make a request first? Ragnarok nodded. I have not seen my parents' wills. And with my guardian's consent, I would like to read their wills around the time of my birthday. Ragnarok got very tense. Mr. Potter, your wizarding guardian pro tem, the headmaster of your school, should have arranged for you to hear your parents' wills on your 11th birthday. Has this not been done? Harry shook his head and Sirius, in the background, got very mad. I have never heard their wills. Not received information as to what their legacies were. I only recently found out that there were properties and vaults associated with their estates. Ragnarok got very upset himself. Quote, there will be fines and penalties associated with this failure. I will discuss these with you after the wills have been read, in addition to arranging the matter discussed. That will be fine. At the time that you discuss such things with Headmaster Dumbledore, you might also want to discuss the information that we talked of in your private office. The headmaster's library is the only place that I know of that might contain the information. Hermione looked very interested. Information was her thing, and any chance to obtain it would not be passed up. Harry, however, turned to her and said, some information cannot be given out. I will tell you what I can after it is resolved. Hermione almost pouted. Harry knew something she didn't, but apparently he couldn't tell her everything. Ragnarok took this in very deliberately. Albus Dumbledore had unknowingly or deliberately run afoul of many goblin customs. He had failed to inform them of the party responsible for the break-in of their vaults. As the chief of the Wizengamot, at least, the information should have been relayed. He had retained the sword of Gryffindor when it had been revealed. This was not as pressing as Ragnarok had relinquished the goblin claim to the item. But he also held information on the creation of Horcruxes. Ragnarok admitted that this might have also passed on to the headmaster from his predecessors, but something would have to be done about that. However, the failure to have a relevant will read to a charge could carry stiff penalties. After the will is read, I would request goblin aid in recovering the carcass of Slytherin's beast from the Chamber of Secrets and distributing the proceeds from it. I would like to discuss that at that time. During that excursion, I can help with one of the items you asked about. Harry could retrieve the diadem for the goblins at that time. Ragnarok nodded his head. That would be acceptable as well. I have a meeting with Amelia Bones of Magical Law Enforcement on Monday. After that meeting, I might have information to aid in the fight against Voldemort. Please feel free to come to us, and as he is now recognized as an enemy to the Goblin Nation, any aid we can give. Will be provided, and any aid provided us will be compensated for. Sirius and Hermione looked shocked. Apparently a lot had happened in the private office. One last item. I have found that Ms. Gran Gier here is interested in studying law after her Hogwarts education, in an effort to help to reform our society. Would there be any scholarships available should she qualify? Hermione looked very hopeful. Ragnarok could see that Mr. Potter had skillfully avoided mentioning anything that they had talked about in his private office. By doing so, the Goblin Nation could reinforce the future alliance. Why arranging things without mentioning at this time that it was Harry Potter's instigation? The Goblin Nation is in full support of her stated goals and will cover all expenses to attend the Muggle institution called Oxford University. In exchange for her future aid in helping the Goblin Nation attain equal status in the magical world. Hermione's eyes shined with unshed tears. Many of her future hopes and dreams would be fulfilled. Apparently at the instigation of the main character in the rest of her future hopes and dreams, one Mr. Harry James Potter. She hadn't been this happy since a skinny, messy-haired boy had jumped on a troll to save her when she was 11 years old. Well, Mr. Potter, I think this concludes our meeting for today. Gringotts will contact you shortly before the 31st of July as to the matters discussed. At that time, we will be prepared to sign contracts with Ms. Granger for her scholarship to Oxford University. Mr. Black, we will contact you later this week as to the arrangements for your properties. Harry and the others stood. Harry put his fist to his chest and nodded his head in salute. May your vaults flow with gold and your enemies die by your hand. Knock returned the salute and farewell with, "May your life be filled with bounty and your enemies be crushed." Harry and the others left the office with a goblin escort. Ragnock took a few moments to think upon his meeting with Harry Potter. In the history of the goblin race, the number of wizards that the goblins trusted fully could be counted on one hand. In 4 hours, his views of Harry Potter, K.N. owned to the wizarding world as the boy who lived, had changed significantly. Here was a wizard who was a successful warrior, who offered the goblins equal courtesy. He had given them more information they expected about the dark wizard known as Lord Voldemort. This Tom Marvolo riddle had sullied their lands by instigating the placement of a Horcrux in a goblin vault. The creature's follower Bellatrix Lestrange had aided in this. Her vaults were forfeit. Mr. Potter's vault would fill considerably as a result of that. Another follower, Lucius Malfoy, had, albeit unknowingly of its true nature, passed on a proscribed device. The goblins would have to warn Lord Black that his cousin, Narcissa Black Malfoy, would be in significant peril, as the Malfoy name, along with the Lestrange name, would be significantly damaged as a result of the revelations this day. On that, there was goblin honor involved. Harry Potter could now expect the full weight of the goblin nation to be behind him in his endeavors. This he had earned. Now it was time to put some plans into place and into action to secure the future of the goblin nation. Harry, Hermione and Sirius were led to a nearby conference room to reclaim their memories. Apparently Ragnock had shared the information with his advisors. They were then led out of the bank. Sirius and Hermione noticed that every goblin that they passed out of the bank offered Harry a salute or bow as he passed. They looked at each other shocked as to the treatment Harry was receiving in the bank. As they were bowed out of the bank, Sirius looked at Harry and said, "Well, pup. I think there will be some explaining to do once we get back to the Grangers." Sirius sent off a Patronus message to Tonks to help collect the teens as they moved to the apparition point. By the time they arrived, she was waiting for them. "Watch her, Jensen lady. We were wondering what took so long. Stories when we get back." I will side along Hermione while Sirius side alongs Harry. The apparition point is next to the guest house surrounded by Muggle notice me not charms. Any questions? Everyone shook their head as Sirius moved to the apparition point with Harry. Why hung back and insisted Hermione and Tonks go first. As far as he was concerned, the faster Hermione was back under wards, the better. Hermione and Tonks disappeared with a pop, followed a minute later by Harry and Sirius. As they moved towards the back door of the Granger home, the door opened and Emma yelled out, "Dinner's ready. Come and get it." The threesome moved gladly into the house. As they moved to the dining room, they removed their outer cloaks and robes that they had gotten at Madame Malkin's and hung them up in a hallway closet with Harry following with the suit vest he had worn below them. Everyone sat down as Emma brought in the food. The questions started soon after. Hermione was up first. "Harry, where did you learn so much of goblin customs?" "Well," he said sheepishly, "I spent a portion of the time when I was skipping the divination exam in the library. The meeting had been requested last week, so I knew I needed a crash course." "Well, I for one was very impressed." She looked around the table. He had them eating out of the palm of his hand. By the end, all of the goblins were saluting or bowing as we left the bank. Tonks looked shocked. Blimey. No one gets treated that way by goblins. Right surly buggers, normally. What the hell happened? "One moment," he said to the table in general. He leaned closer to Hermione for a moment and asked her quietly how much her parents knew. Hermione blushed and whispered back, "I might have left a few details out. No help for it now though, might as well get it all out in the open. Well, before we begin, I would like to say that any information we talk about needs to be kept here. Emma, Robert, I should warn you now. I can be a magnet for trouble, not that I always go looking for it, but I always end up in it. Hermione, being my best friend in the world, on occasion has also been involved. She hasn't told you all of this in an effort to protect me, I am sure, but you need to know some of the things that have happened over the years as background." At that Emma and Robert looked at their daughter who was blushing. As they looked back, Harry started telling all of their experiences at Hogwarts and his own in the summers between beginning with their first year. Various comments were elicited from the others as the story progressed. No one said anything about a troll. We were told it was a creature somewhat like a large wild dog. Hermione headed that off with comments about not wanting to worry them too much. Sirius laughed when they talked about the dragon in first year with Hagrid, but LL of the adults looked upset when the detention in the Forbidden Forest was recounted, as well as the large Cerberus being mentioned, although they all laughed when they learned its name was Fluffy. There were faintly reproving looks when Harry, with some interjections with Hermione, explained their decision to go through the trapdoor. The incident with Peeves caused laughter by Sirius and Tonks, and they had to explain that. The confrontation with Quirrell elicited some looks of horror, and all were relieved that the result was not worse. Sirius pouted when Harry mentioned the last Quidditch game that was lost when he was in the hospital wing. Harry plowed on with the events leading up to second year and what happened then. Sirius looked thoughtful when Harry told of meeting Dobby. The resulting trip by flying car elicited both statements of disapproval and laughter mixed in. Lockhart's antics brought a blush to Hermione's face as she had been starstruck and her parents remembered how she had gone out about him when she learned he would be at Hogwarts. Harry explained he was a Parseltongue and what that meant, and how he had been involved with the first attacks. The brewing of Polyjuice and the trip to the infirmary were told with humor, although Emma and Robert looked a bit reproving while they smiled, who knew their daughter could be such a rule breaker. Hermione added her explanation about her research and finding out it had been a basilisk. When Hermione told of being petrified, Robert had to comfort his wife. Harry's adventure with the Acromatulas and Aragog were things that even Hermione had not heard details of. The decision to go after Ginny was met with clenched hands by the adults around the table. Lockhart's dishonesty was met with disgust, and the adults thought he had gotten what was coming to him. The slaying of the basilisk was greeted with a bit of awe. The freeing of Dobby caused a few laughs, but the revelations about Lucius caused Sirius to revise his decisions, and he resolved to speak to Narcissa again. Sirius became involved with telling of third year and his part in it. The blowing up of Aunt Marge made the adults laugh, while Fudge's involvement caused some looks of thoughtfulness. The Dementors outraged the Grangers, who were getting quite annoyed with the dangers that no one had told them their daughter had been subjected to. Sirius apologized for his part in that. But the Grangers blamed Cornelius Fudge after hearing that Dumbledore had tried to fight the decision to have them placed around Hogwarts. The Marauders map had to be explained, with Emma agreeing with Hermione's initial impulse to turn it in, while Robert, as a man, was more understanding of the decision not to. Even as a fairly responsible person, he had been involved with a fair bit of pranking and practical jokes as a teenager. Sirius, of course, cheered the result. Harry learning the Patronus charm at 13 impressed the hell out of Tonks, who had not heard of it before. Fudge's outright refusal to listen to reason outraged all of the adults. The rescue of Sirius and Buckbeak was met with cheers. No one liked to see an innocent animal destroyed. The fourth year included what happened at the World Cup. Hermione had told them of this as an attack by terrorists. Harry told of the lessons about the unforgivables, and Sirius and Tonks looked mightily impressed by Harry's ability to throw off the Imperious Curse. The incident of the goblet spitting out Harry's name and the subsequent reactions of the student body made the adults angry, especially about Ron and his disloyalty. The Grangers listened with awe as he talked about overcoming a full-sized dragon, while they laughed when Harry told them about Hermione's reaction when she and Ron had gotten to the tent. Hermione slapped Harry's shoulder when he described the finger marks on her face. The Yule Ball was recounted, with Harry earning a hug and a kiss on the cheek when he told them about how beautiful Hermione was in her ball gown. The second task was explained, with the Grangers looking angry about their daughter being used in the second task without their permission, although they were very appreciative about Harry's refusal to allow any of the hostages to be left behind under any circumstances. Hermione looked at him and only said, "Noble Pratt," with a watery smile on her face. The third task and what had been happened during that and the revelations of its aftermath included the subsequent invitation to the bank and to see Amelia Bones. When Harry was all done with the Hogwarts tales, he continued with telling about what happened at the bank. The goblins are a warrior race. They are also extremely appreciative of respect for their customs. When I was respectful, they returned it in kind. I offered them the chance to review my memories, and as a result they consider me a warrior due to warriors' courtesies. The information that Ragnarok asked about I promised not to divulge, but it was of sufficient importance to them that they decided to declare Voldemort. He was happy that no one at the table flinched, an enemy of the Goblin Nation, and they are very much proponents of the philosophy that the friend of my enemy is my enemy. They also are applying the converse in this case. Which leads us to Hermione's announcement. Hermione blushed as her parents looked at her. When the goblins learned of my plans to work on equal rights for all magical creatures, including goblins, as well as non-pureblood witches and wizards, the goblins agreed to provide a full scholarship to Oxford University so that I can study law to help me with my future plans. They also offered to provide support during my education. Emma and Robert lost all thought for a moment. Their little girl had so impressed a race of warriors that they had granted her a full scholarship 3 years before she would even be able to attend. The Grangers got up and rushed around the table to hug their daughter, while Hermione basked in their obvious approval of her future plans. Harry looked on proudly while Tonks was shocked. Sirius looked at Harry knowing that he had somehow arranged this. Harry had too much Marauder blood and God blood to not have been involved in it directly. When Emma had finished hugging Hermione, she moved to Harry and engulfed him in what was very much like her own version of a Hermie hug. I want to thank you for always protecting my daughter. She means the world to her dad and I. Harry stammered a little and replied, always. Robert shook his hand as well, and Dee then smacked him lightly across the back of his head, and said, and that's for getting her into trouble with the extracurricular activities. Robert laughed out loud, quickly followed by everyone else laughing as well. However, after they sat down, they sobered down a little and everyone, seeing how serious they were, quickly became serious as well. Harry, Robert started, I appreciate the honesty that you have shown tonight. I admit if I had found out some of this information before, I would have been tempted to find another school for Hermione to finish her education. Hermione looked nervous at that. We are not happy about the danger that she, and you as well, have been subjected to by poor decisions from the adults around you. Some of these decisions we should have been consulted about, and we should have been more informed by the school of some of the things that have happened. Hermione also should have told us more. Hermione looked embarrassed and downcast at that. However, knowing the convictions of our daughter, I cannot really think that the results would have been much different, so maybe it was better that we didn't know. Robert looked at Hermione and addressed her directly. I can see that you have stood by Harry for a long time. Hermione looked up and a defiant look crossed her face. Robert was familiar with that look and knew that Hermione would continue to stand by Harry regardless of their own decisions. But it is a parent's job to be worried for their children, so in the future, we would like to know everything, even if you think it might worry us. Hermione, with watery eyes, ran around the table herself to hug her parents. She knew then that they would not take her from Harry. She was happy that they now knew everything and she no longer had to hide things from them. She could talk to her father about her worries and her mother about how to deal with Harry. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Harry was thankful that Hermione had such strong parents. Sirius was proud of them both and how they had coped through so many harrowing experiences, especially Harry. Tonks was moved by the moment between Hermione and her parents. She herself had always had her parents' full support and she knew how important it was. When everyone had settled down, Harry added more information. The goblins having agreed to help get rid of Voldemort makes it a much easier proposition. There are things I can't tell you that Ragnarok and I discussed, but they will have a significant impact. The fact that the Director of Magical Law Enforcement has been aware of the situation at this stage means that the Aurors will be more prepared than they would have been. Harry looked around at the table, and his face took on a look of resolve. I will be involved. The adults' faces looked worried. I have been involved with the fight against Voldemort my whole life. He is bent on killing me and he killed my parents. I can't avoid it. I won't do it for revenge. But I will do it so that Hermione's children, Harry mumbled, which I hope will be my children as well. Hermione beamed at this with a blush, as Harry's voice became strong again, will be safe and never know the threat of war. Hermione is involved. Hermione's face took on a similar look of resolve. As a first-generation witch, Voldemort and his followers' position would dictate that she should not be allowed to exist. So, even without me she would be in danger. She has stood by me for years now and she will not back down from a fight. Harry looked down for a moment. If I had my way, she wouldn't be involved at all. Hermione squawked in disagreement. However, he looked back at her and grabbed her hand. She is first and foremost a person of her own mind, and her convictions would not allow her to stand back and watch someone else, especially me I know, being involved without doing all she could to help. She learned this from you. She is the brightest witch of our age, and I cannot win without her. Hermione leaned over and gave Harry a huge hug, and they sat there for a moment lost in the moment. The adults around the table looked at the two teens. Emma wasn't happy her daughter was involved. But she had found an extraordinary boy that made her happy. Harry would most likely become her son-in-law, and she could see that Hermione would follow Harry to assault the gates of hell itself. And seeing Harry's character, he just might do that. Robert knew that at that moment, he had become the second most important male in his daughter's life. He was of two minds about that. His daughter was a person of conviction which made him proud. Harry would apparently do anything he could to protect her, and had the power and resources to do it. But she, at 15 going on 16, was going to war. And there was nothing he could do about it. Sirius thought about how proud Prongs and Lily would be at that moment. They had both got to Hogwarts in a background of the threat of Voldemort and his Death Eaters. They had fought the good fight, and their son was going to finish it. Harry had impressed Tonks. She knew that if Voldemort was back, even with a mutant body, that the boy would have to be trained. Sooner rather than later. She resolved to speak to Madame Bones about it when they visited the ministry on Monday. She could see the resolve in the both of them that she had joined to Aurors to see. These were two remarkable people, and she resolved that she would help them in any way. Even if she teased them mercilessly, she thought with a smile. Emma broke the moment. Well, enough about all of this depressing stuff. Obviously there are plans to be made, but at the moment you are on holiday. Tomorrow will be a day of rest. Harry will do his thing on Monday, and we will plan our vacation in Naples this week. There are days to plan, and days to relax. For the next few days, it is summer and there is a pool. She smirked at her daughter. Besides, I think Harry would like to see you in that new bikini we got earlier today. Hermione exclaimed, "Mother, really?" While she blushed. Harry blushed as well, while looking shamefacedly interested. Sirius and Tonks laughed. Ed with Emma, while Robert took on a slightly greenish face before he laughed as well. The rest of the night passed talking about myriad things, with the adults teasing the teens constantly while Harry and Hermione tried to avoid burning their faces with their blushing. Harry lay on top of the bed that night thinking about the last week. 1 week ago he had been in the Grim Reaper's office, dead aft. What should have been the final battle in the war. Thinking back, he realized that too much had been lost in that time because of his impulse to charge right in without thought, as well as the deliberate lack of information he was subjected to. He really preferred the way things were going. All of a sudden, he heard a voice beside him which made him jump. "Hiya, Harry. How's it hanging?" Harry looked over and saw his Grim Reaper Larry sitting on the chair next to the desk in the room smirking at him. "Oh Merlin, you startled me. What are you doing here? Did I mess something up?" "Nope. Actually, me and Bob have been right impressed with what you've done so far." "So, why are you here? You remember the contract, right? The one I signed before I left back to the graveyard." "That's the one. Sure. I am supposed to keep everything to myself, and I can only tell Hermione if I choose to." "Well, yeah, but you didn't read the fine print." "Fine print? Yep, the fine print. What didn't I read that is in the fine print? As a result of the need for destiny repair and to ensure the client moves successfully toward his destiny, periodic reviews by the client's Grim Reaper will be scheduled at regular intervals until the director of the appropriate Reaper department deems it unnecessary." "Oh, Merlin, so that means..." "Yep, I'm going to be visiting regularly till Laura decided you don't need it anymore." "She's still annoyed with me." "Yep, how long does that last anyway?" "William Wallace kept her annoyed for 50 years. And the last 30 was after his death." "Oh shite, that about sums it up. So, what did these reviews entail anyway?" "Oh, just a general inspection of what is happening and any advice that destiny repair might have to pass along to the client." "So, Bob." "Yeah, Bob. Bob decided to take you on as his hobby. Gets right boring at times, and a spirit's gotta have a hobby." Harry groaned. "So, Bob have any advice to pass on?" "Not yet. You're still going. On the advice he gave you before you came back. I'd be worrying if I were you though. Why's that? Bob gets a crazy look when he talks about fixing your destiny up. What's liable to happen? Don't know. But the last time it happened the colonies became independent. Harry groaned again. So, anything else? Just one thing. What's that? Have some fun. Larry smirked at him and disappeared right as he heard a knock on his door. Harry called out for whoever was at the door to come in. The door opened slowly and Hermione peeked in. Hello, Hermione. It's okay. I'm decent, Harry smiled at her. Hermione smiled back and moved to sit on the bed next to Harry. I wanted to thank you. For what? I know you had something to do with that scholarship. Hermione, whether or not I had anything to do with it. Ragnarok was the one that gave it to you. So he must have thought that you deserved it. Harry sat up and hugged Hermione, pulling her head onto his shoulder and rubbing her back lightly as he rested his head on her curls. They sat like that for a moment until Hermione pulled back and looked at him with a blush. What? Hermione stammered. I'm a little nervous about wearing a bikini in front of you. She bowed her head. I know I'm not built the same way as some of the other girls, and, well, I don't want to disappoint you. Harry reached out and lifted her chin up. Would why? Oh, you believe me if I said I have no interest in how other girls are built and I'm sure you look brilliant in a bikini. Hermione smiled tremulously as Harry looked into her eyes. Besides, I think I might be the one who has to worry. Hermione cocked her head. Why's that? Harry blushed and said, well, I'm a right skinny runt and I don't know that I'll be all that impressive. Hermione giggled at him. I for one like you the way you are. Besides, you have that Quidditch body. All the twists and turns have worked the right places. She laughed at his fish-like look. Harry had not expected a comment from the proper Hermione Granger. He started blushing bright red. Well, thank you. How about we both agree to not worry since we both probably still have some filling out to do. Okay, Harry. I won't be embarrassed if you won't. Harry paused a moment. Well, there are more things to be embarrassed about. Hermione rolled her eyes. Okay, what now? Harry looked everywhere but into her eyes. I'm a hormonal teenage bloke. And seeing you in a bikini might produce hormonal teenage bloke responses. Hermione thought about that for a moment and her eyes widened. Oh, truth be told, she was more than a little flattered that Harry might view her in such a way. She smiled shyly at him and leaned over and kissed him. Well, I won't hold it against you. Some things just can't be controlled. She kissed him again with a bit more enthusiasm. Harry was just as enthusiastic. She pulled back and glanced down. She giggled and said, hey, I think I see what you mean by hormonal teenage reactions. She turned red as she said this. Harry was quite embarrassed. Hermione leaned over and said, I'll tell you a secret. I get hormonal teenage girl reactions when I see you. She kissed him quickly, went to the door, looked back at him and glanced down one more time and said, good night, Harry. Sweet dreams. Harry was probably going to have to end up taking care of his hormonal teenage boy reaction quite soon. The next day proved that he was in a position to be embarrassed. After breakfast, cooked by Emma, Hermione had told him to meet her at the pool at 10 o'clock. At 9:50, Harry had changed into his swim trunks and put on a t-shirt, before grabbing a towel and heading out to the pool. Hermione wasn't out yet, so Harry decided to lay out on a lounge recliner until she came down. He closed his eyes and waited until her heard, hey, Harry. Hermione stood there in a pale blue two-piece bikini. It wasn't a string bikini, but no guy who saw her in it would ever have doubts that she was all girl. Hey, Hermione. Bikini L looks good. Harry was very happy that at that moment there was a towel covering his lap. Hermione shyly smiled at him, sat down in the next chair, and handed him a bottle of sunblock. Do my back. She turned her back toward him and waited. He hesitantly put some of the sunblock on his hand and started rubbing it into the skin on her back. Hermione shivered as his hands worked her back. His motions were becoming more smooth. Nice hands, he even got the skin under the suit, was her thought. He pulled one of his hands away and poured some more sunblock directly on her back. He then resumed applying it until her back had been covered. She turned and thanked him and offered to his back. She had been waiting for her opportunity to put her hands on him. Harry agreed and hesitantly pulled his t-shirt off and turned his back toward her. She poured some onto her hands and started rubbing it into his back. Nice toned muscle there, she observed to herself. She was really enjoying this and she saw him shiver just as she did when he was doing her back. She finished and handed him the bottle. Okay, finish applying it to the rest of your body, you don't want to get burned. Harry, in a moment of sheer marauderness, said, sure you don't want to put it all on for me. And waggled his eyebrows. Hermione laughed nervously, slapped him on the arm and said, Prat. She lay back, and pretended to close her eyes, acting as though she were not looking as Harry stood and started rubbing the cream onto his legs. His motions seemed distracted, as he was apparently sneaking glances at her as well. Through her almost closed eyes, she could see the front of his shorts and apparently his hormones were active again. Once again, she felt strangely flattered and sexy knowing that she could get such a reaction from him. Harry and Hermione spent the rest of the morning and halfway through to the afternoon alternately laying around the pool and swimming. Both enjoyed their time very much and both could appreciate the physical attributes of the other very much. Hermione's mother and father as well as Sirius and Tonks joined them after lunch. Sirius, the pureblood that he was not used to seeing women in bikinis and had to try very hard not to stare. Tonks laughed at him, as did Harry and Hermione. After it was explained to them, Emma and Robert joined in the laughter. After a while, everyone relaxed, although Robert seemed to be keeping a close eye on how Harry and Hermione interacted. Emma, on occasion, smacked Robert on the side of the head when his staring became obvious. Emma had then suggested a game of pool volleyball and after an explanation of the rules, everyone joined in. It was Harry, Hermione and Sirius against Emma, Robert and Tonks. Harry's athletic ability from playing Quidditch showed through, while apparently Sirius had played beater in his day. He might be out of shape but he could still play. Hermione was not used to the playing of games and missed a number of volleys. Emma wasn't much better than Hermione, but Robert also had a past playing rugby and Tonks was toned from oar training, although this was offset somewhat by her clumsiness. All in all everyone had fun. When mid-afternoon rolled in, Hermione announced to the group as a whole that she and Harry had summer homework that needed to be done. Harry pouted, while the adults laughed, but agreed that doing it now rather than later meant more fun in the long run. The two showered and dressed in t-shirts and shorts and met in Hermione's library room to work on their homework. After 2 hours of working on their potions essays, Emma called them down to dinner. After dinner they returned and finished the potions assignments as well as began on history of magic. Harry's least favorite subject. Hermione helped him by directing him to references to look up for the assignment. At the end, Harry brought up the subject of occlumency. Hermione listened, intrigued, and asked to see Harry's book that he had purchased from Flourish and Bots. She agreed that she would help him to learn it and borrowed it until she could finish reading it. The two teens went back downstairs to interact with Hermione's parents. Sirius and Tonks had gone back to the guest house. They all watched some television, including a show called, Whose Line Is It Anyway? Which all found very funny. Harry and Hermione had a decent goodnight snog for a few minutes until they moved to their separate bedrooms, knowing the next day was important. Harry got up on the 3rd of July realizing that this, only 2 days into it, was the best summer he had had in his life. He had effectively made Voldemort unable to start terrorizing the wizarding world again. He had gotten someone else to take care of the Horcruxes, he had gotten himself away from Privet Drive and he was spending at least part of his summer with Hermione, his best friend and according to his Grim Reaper his soulmate. Harry was almost shocked at how little connection he had with Voldemort now that the Horcrux in his head was destroyed. Even now as he reached out, it took effort and he could only feel annoyance from the connection. And doing that didn't hurt at all. Harry showered and dressed himself and, after spending a little time with Hedwig and filling her water dish and feeding her a treat, went down to see about breakfast. Arriving downstairs, Sirius and Tonks were chatting with Emma in the kitchen. "Morning, pup," Sirius greeted him as he sat down. "Ready for the ministry?" Harry nodded his head as he started eating the porridge and bacon that Emma placed in front of him. "Well, my boss expects us there at 9:30. With the Grangers heading off to work and with both Sirius and I going with you to the ministry, are you bringing Hermione along?" Tonks smirked at Harry. Teasing the two teens over the weekend had been loads of fun. "If it's all the same to you, I don't plan on going anywhere without Hermione if I can possibly help it." Harry's comments earned a smile from Emma and a hug from behind as Hermione had come down to breakfast in the middle of the conversation, walking up behind Harry. Hermione walked over and placed some food in a bowl for Crookshanks, who sat by the bowl waiting impatiently, if Harry could interpret the cat's expression, and then ate down in her pajamas for her own breakfast. It was summer and she wasn't as time-driven in the summer as she was during the school year. Ironic, it occurred to Harry, as summers for him were more me-driven as he was used to getting up early to make breakfast for the Dursleys. Robert came in as well, ready for the day as he and Emma would head out to the office by 8 a.m. They talked about plans for the day. Hermione mentioned wanting to get back to Flourish and Bots in the afternoon to pick up some books she hadn't had a chance to get on Saturday, which caused everyone to smile at her. Sirius mentioned wanting to stop by Gringotts to arrange the meeting for the construction crews and curse breakers for his properties. Tonks needed to check in with Amelia. So, having eaten breakfast, they all trooped off to their various activities. Harry and his group arrived in the ministry atrium. The ministry worker on duty checked them in sans Tonks, who as an Auror was just waved through. They got their buttons and proceeded to the DMLE. When they arrived at the office, Amelia Bones's secretary waved them right into the office. After greetings were exchanged, Madam Bones started off the interview. Mr. Potter. After the events of the 24th of June last, a number of comments came up which I wished to inquire further about. Harry replied with a tired smile, "Ma'am, it's Harry. Just Harry. But what would you like to know?" Amelia smiled at him. "Well, just Harry, that's fine if you call me Amelia, but only in informal settings. Any interviews by for trial evidence or hearings, please. You refer to me as Madam Bones and I will have to refer to you as Mr. Potter." Harry nodded his head. "Now, a comment that you made in the aftermath struck my attention. You said you confronted Voldemort in your first year. Can you explain?" Harry looked thoughtful for a moment. "In actual fact, I confronted Voldemort, or at least a version of him, in every year except third. And in third, I confront Ted Peter Pettigrew, who is a marked Death Eater." Amelia was flabbergasted. "Can you explain?" Harry made the same offer he had made to Ragnarok. "How about I offer copies of Memories of the Confrontee? Ons, and after you review them I will answer any questions that you might have." Amelia pulled out a small pensieve. "This is a solicitor's pensieve. Instead of removing the memory, it is for a copy." "Why?" "Oh, you can place the memories in it and I would like to review them later. We will have to have a second interview for any questions." "That's fine." I showed these memories to Ragnarok and asked Sirius and Hermione to contribute their own. As these are smaller, I might need two to add all the memories that might be relevant. Will that be acceptable?" Amelia, with wide eyes, nodded and pulled out 3 more pensieves. They added the memories, noting that the memory strands copied themselves into the pensieves instead of falling off their wands. This meant that they had to take time to both place the memories and put them back. Harry added events from his first and second years to the first pensieve, and after filling it, added the relevant events from his third and fourth to the second. "I do have a couple of further questions." Harry tensed for a moment. "Growing up with my Muggle relatives there were incidents that I feel might have constituted criminal activity." Sirius and Amelia's eyes widened and Hermione looked shocked. "I don't think what you might be thinking is what I mean." Harry didn't want them to think that he had been sexually abused or anything like that. However, there was some unpleasantness. "Can I ask you to review some memories at your leisure and give me some advice as regards it?" Harry had decided that the activities of Vernon and Petunia Dursley, and how they reared him should at least be known to someone in authority, someone he could trust. As he no longer lived with them, any fallout would not affect his living conditions and there was no reason to hide it. He wasn't about to tell about all of it with his friends or Sirius, it just didn't matter to him anymore. But anything that made his uncles' and aunts' lives hell he figured was worth the loss of privacy. Amelia sat back as Harry copied memories into a third pensieve. She had been personally curious as her Susan had mentioned some disturbing observations she had had. Unfortunately, before now, she had had no access and could not find out. Dumbledore had evaded answering her questions in the past, but now that Sirius had taken over Harry's guardianship as his godfather, it made it much easier to reach him. Sirius, who had heard some rumors, was also curious. Harry hadn't talked much about his childhood, but the almost manic desire to move in with him when he was still on the rue N indicated more problems that he knew about. Some muggles were going to be do some good pranking. Hermione thought about what Harry had said. Admittedly, some of the things she had heard about from Harry made his relatives thoroughly unpleasant people. If there had been other things, why hadn't Dumbledore handled it? Surely, with as much attention as he seemed to have for Harry, shouldn't he have noticed? As far as she was concerned, if they had hurt her Harry, she asked herself, she wouldn't rest until they paid for it. Tonks didn't know what to think. When he was done, he added one more item. Can you tell me what the results of the Triwizard Tournament and Voldemort's return are? Amelia explained what she could. With Sirius there, as a head of an ancient and noble house and Harry's own status, she could say more than she could otherwise. When she was finished, Harry brought up the real reason for his visit to the ministry. I have heard a rumor and I want your opinion. The rumor is that there are records of prophecies. Is that true? All around the table, people looked confused. Amelia affirmed that that was true but was located in the Department of Mysteries, which wasn't under direct ministry control. Can I ask to be taken to see if there are any that involve me? Amelia was very interested. She took them all to the Department of Mysteries and Harry inquired. After he was taken, by himself, to get the prophecy, he came out of the Department of Mysteries and nodded to Amelia. I would like to request that you, as well as the rest, come with me to Gringotts to hear the copy of this prophecy. The original was never allowed out of the department unless all parties named had heard it. In my meeting with Gringotts, there were agreements made as regards Voldemort. As the prophecy apparently is about he and I would like the goblins to see it as well. Amelia looked at him with a little surprise. Tonks hadn't reported in on her detail and this was the first she had heard of this. She agreed and Amelia sent a message to her secretary by flying memo that she would return after lunch. Harry and Hermione were apparated to Diagon Alley and Harry led them to the bank. As they entered through the doors, the goblins on guard detail saluted Harry as he passed by. Amelia and Tonks looked at each other, thought Sirius and Hermione weren't surprised at all. Harry went to wait in line when a goblin approached, bowed and asked them to follow him. Once again they were led through the tunnels toward Ragnarok's office. Amelia turned and asked, "Did you have an appointment, so they were expecting you?" Harry commented to her, "Well, not really. But due to the nature of some of our discussions, Ragnarok is dealing with me." The guards saluted as they opened to doors. Harry returned the salute and bowed to the goblin who had led them to the office. He passed in with the others following. Ragnarok saluted Harry, followed suit before sitting in front of Ragnarok when he indicated the chairs in front of his desk. "Welcome, Mr. Potter. How may Gringotts help you today?" Amelia couldn't believe the casualness with which Mr. Potter was meeting with the leader of the Goblin Nation. Even the Minister of Magic could not walk in and meet with him without a prior appointment, an appointment which would not often be offered. Add to that the courtesy with which he was shown, which never in her experience had a witch or wizard seen given to them. This was almost a surreal experience. She was about to be even more shocked. "Director Ragnarok, I have some additional information to add to what we discussed on Saturday." Ragnarok nodded for him to continue. "I have retrieved a prophecy from the Department of Mysteries that bore both my and Voldemort's name. I would like to review this with you as witness with our alliance in mind. Mr. Potter, I would request that I bring advisors of my own to view it as well." Harry nodded his agreement. Ragnarok said one word to his guard captain. The captain nodded and moved out of the office. As they waited, Ragnarok asked after their comfort and if they would like any refreshments. After Harry asked if Ragnarok himself was taking refreshment and was answered in the negative, Harry stated that he was most comfortable and politely added that no goblin need be concerned with serving him. The rest of the group followed suit. Knowing that it was prudent to follow Harry's lead, Ragnarok's eyes gleamed. Shortly thereafter several goblins, most who looked somewhat close to age to Ragnarok himself, came in and saw on a bench on the side of the office. "My advisors are here. Please proceed." Harry asked if he could use his wand. After he was granted permission, he placed the ball on the desk and left his hand on it as he tapped it with his wand as he was instructed when he obtained it. A small image of Sybil Trelawney rose out of the ball and gave the prophecy that had so vexed him in the previous timeline. The one With the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies. J.K.R. Order of the Phoenix. When it was finished, everyone around the room sat back in shock until he heard Hermione sobbing beside him. He reached over and, mindless of any audience, pulled her into his lap and held her until she calmed down. When she came back to herself, she noticed that everyone was waiting for Harry to continue, and she apologized to Ragnarok as she moved back to her own seat. Have no concern, Ms. Granger. It is understandable that such things happen when one finds their life mate with such a heavy destiny. Hermione blushed at Ragnarok's use of life mate. Ragnarok turned to Harry. Your interest in seeing this creature destroyed is now made plain. He has already been declared an enemy of the Goblin Nation. If you agree to declare blood feud against Tom Marvolo Riddle, self-named Lord Voldemort, and the House of Gaunt, I offer oath for the Goblin Nation to be placed under your command and this alone. We would be your hand that leads to the destruction of this vile creature. Around the room the witches and wizards were completely floored. Harry had never expected this offer. And according to the prophecy, if the Goblin Nation acted as his hand, it just might work. Amelia and the rest could never have imagined such a thing. She didn't even know what Voldemort's name had been. Amelia knew that this would create severe repercussions throughout the magical world. There was no law or treaty against it, as never had the Goblin Nation willingly placed itself under the control of any witch or wizard in any way. Alliances, yes. Control, number. As long as it was registered as an agreement with a noble house and the noble house was executing blood feud, nothing could stop anyone from coming under their banner. Harry looked over at Sirius, who nodded at him. Looking to Hermione, she nodded as well. As far as she was concerned, anyone who could help Harry meant there was less chance of him dying before those future plans of hers had met fruition. After some thought, Harry said, I will agree. If you draw up a magically binding contract with limitations to Voldemort and his Death Eaters and them alone, I will declare blood feud and sign the contract as you dictate. This contract will conclude at the death of Voldemort, as I do not desire to encumber upon your sovereignty any more than the death of Voldemort necessitates. Mr. Potter, as Director of Magical Law Enforcement, I must inform you that to declare blood feud, you must do so in front of the Wizenmaggot with at least 2/3 members present. As you are a minor still, your guardian, Sirius Black, must agree and must also declare blood feud. Mr. Black and Mr. Potter, do you understand what I have said? Both replied in the affirmative. Tonks, your temporary assignment has been changed to a permanent one. As of this moment, you are assigned the protection detail of Mr. Potter until the situation with Voldemort is resolved fully. Do you understand and agree? She replied in the affirmative. Director Ragnarok, as Director of Magical Law Enforcement, I will agree to help in any way I can with your and Mr. Potter's efforts in this. Is there anything I can do for you? Ragnarok liked these humans. Instead of the disdain shown to goblins that they normally expected, each had shown courtesy and respect and treated them as equals. He turned to his captain and said a word in gobbledygook. The captain moved to the side of the office, picked up files and brought them back to Ragnarok. Madam Bones, contained within these files are the records we have of Lucius Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange. They have violated agreements with us, and as a result we may pass along any information we feel relevant to you. The Lestrange woman has had her vaults confiscated and her victims will be recompensed from it. Lucius Malfoy shall soon have all agreements and debts through Gringotts cancelled. Should you desire any aid from us in your prosecution of these individuals, you only need ask. Questions as regards this shall be sent to my office. Lord Black, should you wish to shield your kinswoman, Narcissa Black Malfoy, or her son, Draco Malfoy, now would be the time. Because they may be negatively affected in our punishment of Lucius Malfoy for his transgression. Amelia received the files with excitement. She was sure that information on bribes could be obtained from them, and she hoped it was enough to convict him. When she finally looked through the files, she would learn that it was greater than she could ever hope, and Cornelius Fudge would fall as a result of this as well. Harry interjected. Director Ragnarok, please include Neville Longbottom and his family and those that have been victimized by Bellatrix Lestrange. Most of those around the table nodded in agreement to this. Hermione wondered what she had done to Neville. She would ask about that later. As I have plans to be out of the country for 2 weeks beginning this next weekend, can all agreements be made before or after that? Quote. Amelia thought about it. I can request a meeting of Wizenmaggot for Friday. Will be that sufficient time to draft any contracts and agreements? Harry looked to Ragnarok. That will be acceptable. I shall have the contracts and agreements to be filed by then. Harry had a thought. Hermione, have you owled Luna yet since school let out? Hermione shook her head. It's only been 3 days. I was planning on doing so tomorrow or so. What does everyone think here about releasing to the public through the Quibbler Voldemort's actual name and his half-blood status and history? I don't think the Prophet would carry it, but her dad seems like he's more open. After a suitable period of amazement from some at the information, Sirius laughed. Be a right good prank. The Quibbler is small, but there is a significant readership. Sounds good to me. Make the Death Eaters look like idiots in front of the other pure bloods. Hermione started making plans for pen. Sieve memories and wanted to help Harry send it off. Harry, can we purchase or obtain a solicitor's pensieve so that we can copy memories to send with it? Harry looked to Ragnarok and Ragnarok turned to his captain and said a word. The captain moved to the cabinets off to the side where the pensieves used earlier had been and pulled out a small one. Ms. Granger, the Goblin Nation gifts you with T.'s solicitor's pensieve so that you may use it in this fight and your future endeavors. Hermione stood and bowed to Ragnarok and thanked him. She held back any tears. A gift from a goblin was a rare thing. It implied a level of trust she didn't know that she deserved. Harry finished the meeting with a request for a debit card similar to Sirius's. It was provided and as Harry stood, salutes were passed all around. A major step toward Voldemort's destruction had been taken, and all present knew it. Harry insisted on treating Hermione to Flourish and Bots. Amelia had taken the files she had been given and gone back to her office. Sirius had excused himself as he had to handle some black family business. Tonks followed the teens and teased them as they moved through the alley. After a lunch at the Leaky Cauldron, they proceeded to the bookstore where Hermione got every book she could on goblin customs, several on defense against the dark arts, some on magical law and a few others that she thought might be useful. The fact that she would be helping Harry meant that she didn't feel so guilty spending Harry's money. As far as Harry was concerned, Hermione could buy every book in the store and he would have happily provided. A number of hours later, Sirius returned and they went back to the Granger home. After recalling what had happened, Robert and Emma were relieved that there were people in high places who were going to help take the pressure off of Harry, and by extension Hermione. Sirius had gotten Narcissa and Malfoy, who was sullen and disagreeing, out from under Lucius's control. Sirius liked Sissy. Unfortunately, Draco was part of the package as Narcissa insisted. Little did he know how relieved he would be by the end of the summer. The week up to Friday was filled with homework, vacation plans and preparations for the Wizenmaggot meeting. Although they had a lot of things to prepare for, they all decided that there should be some fun. Harry got to see a bit more of Hermione in a bikini, and it was a hormonal teenager that went to bed every night. Hermione appreciated Harry in a swimsuit as well. Although Quidditch was not a strenuous sport, the twists and turns that players had to perform to maneuver around a pitch, especially the chasers and seekers, left a body toned even if it didn't bulk them up. Work the leg muscles, the largest muscles in the body, and fat tended to melt away from the cardiovascular effect. It was very much like horse riding. Not very strenuous, but no one who spent most of their life in a saddle was very flabby. The snogging was quite fun as well. Everything was looking good until Friday morning. On the day of the Wizenmaggot meeting, scheduled for the afternoon, Tonks made a comment about a Dementor attack in Little Wingan. When she and Sirius were reading the Daily Prophet waiting for the rest of the house to get up. Harry, remembering what had happened in the last timeline, asked to see the paper. He read the paper, about how 2 Muggle teenagers had been kissed, while others, apparently Dudley was included as he was pictured looking confused and not mindless, had felt the effects and fainted. Harry slammed the paper down on the table, looked up at Sirius and Tonks and said with venom, Dolores Umbridge. That's for today.